Chapter 1388 Huiyi's Request. Chapter 1388, Huiyi's Request. Bei Xiu's pupil contracted when Jian Wushuang rejected him once again. After a short silence, Bei Xiu spoke again. Wushuang, if I'm not mistaken, your consciousness attack technique originated extraordinarily, right? As I've said, the consciousness attack technique was passed down by my master. I wonder what you mean when you say that? Jian Wushuang lowered his voice. Shouldn't this technique be from out of Tianling land? Bei Xiu fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Outside of Tianling land? Jian Wushuang looked surprised. There's another land or world outside of this Tianling land. Bei Xiu creased his eyebrows when he saw Jian Wushuang's expression. This boy really doesn't know, or is he pretending? Bei Xiu wasn't sure himself. Bei Xiu, it's impossible for me to teach you the consciousness attack technique. If there's nothing else, I shall leave. Jian Wushuang didn't bother with Bei Xiu's response but walked outside the palace. Watching Jian Wushuang left the palace, Bei Xiu's face grew grave. He rejected him even when I traded with my Feng Ling knack and bronze mirror. Humph, so what if you rejected me? You think you don't trade and I wouldn't be able to get the 5B soul manipulation knack from you? That's funny. Just you wait. In no time the 5B soul manipulation knack will be in my hand. Bei Xiu held his fists tight as coldness spread in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, who had just left the palace, looked extremely solemn too. Bei Xiu recognized the 5B soul manipulation knack and knows that the 5B soul manipulation knack is from out of Tianling land? Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightly knitted. He never expected that. Tianling land was merely a mystery land that Lineage of Star controlled. Theoretically, the experts in Tianyuan Mystery Land and the Eternal Chaotic World shouldn't be in contact. Those impressive techniques or secret skills in Eternal Chaotic World, the experts in Tianling Land shouldn't be able to recognize them. But in the end, Bei Xiu came to a realization. Luckily, he only noticed that my 5B soul manipulation knack came from Tianling Land but couldn't tell that I'm a cultivator from out of Tianling Land. Plus, I am a peak 3-starred Soul Master of Soul Master Hall and I'm on Soul Island. Even if Bei Xiu has a powerful background, he couldn't deal with me publicly. In other words, I am still in a safe situation as of now. Even so, I have to be extremely careful. Jian Wushuang was already extremely careful. Then Jian Wushuang continued to stay on Soul Island. He cultivated on Soul Island and he often headed over to the battleground to fight with other Soul Masters to learn from them. His 5B soul manipulation knack was merely beginner level. He had masses of room for improvement. Time flowed past like water. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang stayed on Soul Island for 260 years. In the 260 years, he spent all his time and effort on familiarizing himself with the 5B soul manipulation knack. In those years, he fought countless times with a large number of soul masters. Along with the fights, he mastered the 5B soul manipulation knack even better. Until then, he was at the great achievement stage of 5B soul manipulation knack. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat down as his eyes twinkled with brightness. Great achievement stage of 5B soul manipulation knack. My soul attack became fiercer, scarier. My overall power improved tremendously too. It's a pity that after so many years of cultivation, my soul power has yet to break through the bottleneck. Jian Wushuang felt regretful. His soul power had already reached the limit of an advanced universe god in the third heaven back when he was in Lineage of Star. He had nearly leveled up to peak universe god in the third heaven. But it was a pity that the last step took him so long. If his soul power were to have a breakthrough again, his soul attack would improve tremendously. Jian Wushuang. The voice was from outside the secret room. Jian Wushuang was surprised but immediately appeared outside the secret room. Feng Tao Huiyi, why did the two of you come? Jian Wushuang looked at the two of them outside the secret room. Although Jian Wushuang often fought with others to learn from them during his stay on Soul Island, he never had any friends. The closest ones were Feng Tao and Huiyi. We were looking for you, Feng Tao. What's happened? Jian Wushuang asked. Huiyi, you say it? Feng Tao looked at Huiyi. Well, Huiyi started explaining, I am having trouble in cultivation and I'll require a few desolate crystal for assistance. But desolate crystals. They are too precious. Although there are many soul masters who have desolate crystals, their asking price is too high. I can't afford it, so I can only go to the deserted region to hunt those beasts. Desolate crystals? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Jian Wushuang had stayed on Soul Island for such a long period, but he knew since long ago that the desolated crystal was Tianling crystal. It was merely a different name. Before he came to Tianling Mystery Land, Hall Master Yuan assigned him a task, which was for him to collect 10 Tianling crystals. You came to look for me because you want me to go to the deserted region with you? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, Hui nodded. The deserted region is the most dangerous place in Tianling Land. There are countless beasts in the region and they are all very strong. If I were to go to the deserted region alone to hunt the beast, it would be rather unrealistic. So, I am asking you and Feng Tao, hoping both of you will go with me. Then I would be more secure. Of course, I only want 2 pieces of desolated crystals that we get from hunting the beast. You can take the rest of them. If you are willing to help me, I Hui won't turn you down if you need any help in the future. Even if you wanted me to go through a mountain of swords and a sea of flames. Jian Wushuang exchanged a glance with Feng Tao and they smiled. I'm just going to the deserted region with you. You don't have to go through a mountain of swords and a sea of flames, Feng Tao smiled. Hui, when would you like to go? Jian Wushuang asked. The sooner the better, Hui said. Now then, Jian Wushuang smiled. Hui and Feng Tao were the closest friends he had in Soul Island. Jian Wushuang naturally wouldn't refuse keeping Hui company and making a trip to the deserted region. On top of that, even if Hui wasn't going, he would definitely need to head to the deserted region himself at some point. His task required him to go there after all. He had been practicing the 5-beast soul manipulation knack and he didn't care about the task. However, when he was going to leave Tianling Mystery Land in the future, he was going to have to head to the deserted region to get the 10 Tianling crystals. If so, let's go now, Hui said. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao and Hui immediately left Soul Island and departed towards the deserted region. But just as Jian Wushuang took one step to leave, Mr. Beishio was immediately notified. Chapter 1389 Deserted Region. Chapter 1389 Deserted Region. In a lofty palace, Beishio, who was being entertained by a few beautiful concubines, revealed a shocked gaze. Finally. He is finally willing to leave Soul Island? Beishio looked unusually cold. Jian Wushuang, I waited for you for so long. I thought you would stay on Soul Island for the rest of your life. Soul Island was the headquarters of Soul Master temples. Although he had a strong background, it was best if he didn't take action against Jian Wushuang openly. But then it was different if Jian Wushuang left Soul Island. If you're leaving, don't return for the rest of your life. There was murderous intention spreading across Beishio's sight. The very next moment he left his palace. In a deserted region. A place that was publicly acknowledged to be very dangerous in Tianling Land. Even the top gods in Tianling Land didn't dare to let loose when they were to be in the deserted region. After all, there was a real god that had fallen in the deserted region. The deserted region was famous for its beasts. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao and Hui had already arrived in the deserted region. However, from the beginning, they had merely wandered around the border of the deserted region, not daring to go in deep. It's a beast. Feng Tao turned to look and Jian Wushuang looked too. They immediately saw a unique-looking beast hiding among the bushes at the end of their sight. That is the beast. Jian Wushuang could feel the beast's aura, which was rather unique. It was obviously different from the beast on Tianling Land and the eternal chaotic world. And that was the kind of beast that could nurture Tianling crystal. It's a pity that it is merely a rank 2 beast, Hui shook his head. Jian Wushuang shrugged. He also knew that only when a beast reached rank 3 could it be compared favorably with a 3-starred Soul Master or a level 3 Divine General, which was when they had successfully nurtured a desolate crystal. As for those below rank 3, the crystal would only be under the process. Even if they got it, there wouldn't be much point. Jian Wushuang's task was to get 10 desolate crystals. The desolate crystals, of course, had to be complete crystals. In other words, he had to find a way to kill 10 beasts that could compare favorably with 3-starred Soul Masters and level 3 Divine Generals. Look for them slowly. Although this is the border of the deserted region, there is still danger. We have to be careful. Feng Tao said. Jian Wushuang and Hui both nodded, then the 3 of them continued to go forward into the woods. After a few days. Rumble. The green giant who was giving out a green gleam wielded his mace ferociously at the beast before him, which was more than 5 meters in size. The beast swung a punch and collided with the green giant's mace directly. Bang! There was a loud collision and the green giant fell a few steps back. Die! Hui roared, and suddenly he appeared behind the beast, and he was holding a purple spear in his hand. The spear was consolidated via consciousness and stabbed at the beast. Roar! The beast let out an earth-shattering bellow, and it turned and hit the green giant. The terrifying impact shattered the long spear, and Hui's figure flew out altogether. But then a demonic dragon with a soaring aura entangled the beast's body straight away. The demonic dragon had great power, and it squashed the beast with intensity. At the same time, its dragon claw seized the beast's backspine while it chewed on the beast's skull. Gotcha. Although the beast's defense power was strong, the demonic dragon's bite broke it into two, and a large amount of blood and flesh splashed around. The beast's body shook and finally collapsed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Feng Tao and Hui appeared before Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, you're the best. Hui and I can't do anything about it. Feng Tao looked at the dead body before him and laughed. Of course. Jian Wushuang is a peak 3-starred soul master. How could a beginner 3-starred soul master like us be comparable? Hui said. Hui, hurry and dig out the desolate crystal, Jian Wushuang said. Hui beamed with joy. He immediately squatted down to dissect the beast. Very quickly he picked up a shimmering emerald green crystal. A desolate crystal. This is a good one. Hui held the emerald green crystal and smiled delightedly. This is only the first one. Look how happy you are. We have a peak 3-starred soul master like Jian Wushuang, so now we can have however many desolate crystal we want, Feng Tao laughed. I'm flattered. I can only deal with weaker level 3 beasts. If we were to come across some that were stronger, I wouldn't be able to do anything about it, Jian Wushuang said. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao, I have a suggestion, Hui suddenly said. Jian Wushuang and Feng Tao looked at Hui. The deserted region is huge. Although it is only the border, it is still rather vast. Although there are many level 3 beasts around this area, it is not easy to find them. The three of us spent a few days finding just one, and that was considered lucky. If we were to be unlucky, we might not find one that we could deal with even in 10 days or half a month. So, I suggest that we part ways and look for the beast. What do you think? Hui said. Separately? Jian Wushuang was fine with the idea, but Feng Tao creased his eyebrows slightly. The possibility to find a level 3 beast if we were to go in separate ways is definitely greater. However, the probability to come across danger increases tremendously too. It's fine with Jian Wushuang, but if it were to be either one of us, we might lose our lives. Don't worry. As long as we are not too far away and we keep in contact, once any of us is in danger, the other two can rush over for support, Hui smiled and explained. I'm fine with this, Feng Tao nodded in agreement. If they were not too far apart, they definitely could rush to one another in time with their traveling speed. Let's part ways then, Jian Wushuang smiled. The three of them immediately split up in the deserted region. Although they had separated, the three of them kept in touch at all times so that they knew one another's rough location. Jian Wushuang continued to look for rank 3 beasts in the region. Only on the third day after they separated did Jian Wushuang find a rank 3 beast. The beast doesn't have a strong aura. It should have just turned into a rank 3 beast not long ago. It is much weaker compared to the one I killed earlier. I can deal with it alone. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and then took quick action. After a while, Jian Wushuang killed the beast directly. Then he picked up a desolate crystal from its dead body. Chapter 1390 Scheme. Chapter 1390, Scheme. The first Ling crystal. Jian Wushuang looked at the emerald crystal in his hand and revealed a smile. Jian Wushuang, a Ling crystal is a really good treasure. It is definitely helpful to improve your soul power. If it's possible, try to get more. King of Venomous Worm's voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. Just then. Jian Wushuang, quick, save me. Jian Wushuang received an extremely urgent SOS message and his face grew grave. It's Hui. He's asking for help? Jian Wushuang looked towards where Hui was. Hurry up. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang came to the rescue straight away. He immediately sent a message to Feng Tao on his way there, but Feng Tao didn't reply. What's going on? Feng Tao didn't reply at all? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. However, due to the urgency, he didn't have enough time to think much. He could only rush over with his fastest speed to where Hui was. Hui's location wasn't far from him. With his travel speed, he managed to reach him in a few breaths. Swoosh. Jian Wushuang's figure was stopped on the tree crown, but his gaze grew cold. Hui, what are you doing? Jian Wushuang looked forward, right at Hui Yi who stood on the ground. When Hui Yi saw Jian Wushuang's arrival, he put his hands behind him and stood there in silence with a malicious smile plastered on his face. He didn't even look in a fix, let alone in life danger. Jian Wushuang, don't blame me. Whatever that Master Bei Xiu is offering is too tempting, I can't reject him, Hui Yi smiled. Master Bei Xiu? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. He Jian Wushuang, at last we meet again. A vicious laugh was heard, then a figure slowly appeared before the thick forest. It was no other than Bei Xiu. The very moment Bei Xiu appeared, another two figures came from nowhere. They blocked Jian Wushuang's way, and Jian Wushuang could tell that they were both peak 3-starred soul masters from their armband. Even if Jian Wushuang was distracted, he immediately came back to reality with the sight before him. I'm trapped. It is a lie that he has trouble in cultivation. It is also a lie that he needs desolate crystals. His goal is to lead me to the deserted region and create an opportunity for Bei Xiu. Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold. Jian Wushuang, I guess not everyone is like you and can resist the temptation of Feng Ling Nak. Bei Xiu smiled viciously. He had used Feng Ling Nak to buy Hui Yi over. Hence the scene before his eyes. How about Feng Tao? Jian Wushuang stared at Hui Yi. Don't worry. He naturally has someone to take care of him, Hui Yi smiled. Jian Wushuang, instead of worrying about the other person, why not be worried for yourself? Bei Xiu sneered. Previously on Soul Island, I really couldn't do anything to you. But then, in this deserted region. The deserted region is so dangerous. It is normal that a person or two die here. Oh. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and laughed. Aren't you scared that you couldn't get the manipulation method from me if you killed me? Of course I'm worried. So, I don't intend to kill you. I only want to catch you alive. Only if I catch you alive will I be able to get whatever I want from your head. Bei Xiu smiled but didn't bother talking to Jian Wushuang further. Come on then. Virum. Virum. Two fierce consciousnesses exploded straightway. The two peak 3-starred soul masters that Bei Xiu hired had murderous intentions surging in their eyes. Then, two giants formed by consciousness entirely appeared. The moment the giants appeared, they were covered in armor, boots and helmets. One of their hands held a sword and the other held a shield. Boundless auras were emanating from the two giants. The way they used their consciousnesses is exactly the same? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Suddenly, the two giants that were giving out a soaring aura charged. Their speeds were as swift as lightning. Suddenly, they appeared before Jian Wushuang and the swords that they were holding descended one after another. Rumble. Jian Wushuang's soul power suddenly surged and it formed into a huge dark tortoise covering his body. Bang. Bang. The two giant swords hit the black tortoise and the brightness on the shell grew dim. The black tortoise shook crazily as though it was going to collapse at any time. But in the end it resisted the attack. Humph. One of the peak 3-starred soul masters had deep ripples in his eyes and there was suddenly an amazingly huge consciousness giant behind him. The giant was also wearing armor but he wasn't holding sword and shield but a huge bow. Then the huge giant was already pulling on the bow. Buzz. Boundless power concentrated in the bowstring. Swoosh. A ray of flowing light suddenly exploded. The ray of flowing light went through the void and appeared before Jian Wushuang. It hit the tortoise shell directly. Pist pist pist. The terrifying penetration power spread. At the same time, the two giants in armor wielded their swords and stroked. Jian Wushuang felt pressured. Ching ching. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted at the sound. The black tortoise covering his body was finally unable to withstand the consciousness giant's attack and shattered. The forceful power shook Jian Wushuang and he was in a bind. Swoosh. There was another ray of flowing light again. The consciousness giant pulled his bow and shot another arrow. There was a glimpse of a glare in Jian Wushuang's eyes and a fierce soul power erupted. Inextinguishable light. Jian Wushuang performed the secret skill of Tian Yuan. The secret skill of Tian Yuan was different from 5B soul manipulation knack. The latter was merely a manipulation method of soul power. It was just a foundation. But the secret skill of Tian Yuan was the real secret skill of soul attack. It was definitely only focusing on soul constraint. Even the current him would find it easy to perform the technique. During his years in Soul Island, although he fought ferociously with many soul masters, he never once performed the technique. Until just then when he had put it to play directly. A bunch of lights condensed from soul power and shot out quietly. It seemed quiet and inconspicuous, but when the bunch of lights collided with the arrow that the consciousness giant shot, pissed. It was as easy as breaking dead wood. The flowing light that was transformed from the arrow that the consciousness giant shot suddenly collapsed. The silent attack hit one of the peak 3-starred Soul Master opposites without lessening the force. Chapter 1391, The Strongest Technique. Chapter 1391, The Strongest Technique. Ah! The man in a crimson robe, who was struck by inextinguishable light, immediately shouted and his face distorted in agony. He held his head and his body shivered while the huge consciousness giant collapsed. Go! Jianghu Shuang roared and his soul power surged. There were 4 demonic dragons that swept out immediately. They entangled the 2 consciousness giants and suppressed them. Rubbish! You are all peak 3-starred soul masters. 2 against 1 and the 2 of you are seized? Xiao stood there as he watched the battle before him. He couldn't help but curse. He flipped his palm and a black, mysterious long spear appeared in his hand. Ha! Jianghu Shuang noticed Xiao take out a long spear and his pupils contracted. He could tell that the long spear wasn't ordinary. It should be a treasure used for a consciousness attack. Jianghu Shuang, you must be careful, King of Venomous Worms reminded. Jianghu Shuang nodded and his face grew solemn. Go! Xiao moved his wrist and the long spear shot forward. Oh. The black long spear let out a terrifying force and broke through the void before it with ease. Jianghu Shuang saw that there was suddenly a huge black hole that had appeared from nowhere while there was a faint light in the core of the black hole. Virum. Vast soul power soared into the air and Jianghu Shuang formed a black tortoise shell on his body. The black tortoise let out a low bellow and blocked the black long spear. Bang. A loud bang and the black tortoise that had just formed shattered into pieces. So powerful? Jianghu Shuang was surprised. A powerful force erupted. Even though the force was resisted and weakened by the black tortoise, it could be compared favorably with an attack of an advanced universe god in the third heaven and eternal chaotic world. Even with Jianghu Shuang's divine body, dealing with such an impact immediately made him spit out a mouthful of blood and fly backwards like a bullet. He only managed to stand on his feet again after a while. His face had grown very pale. So strong. Jianghu Shuang was surprised. He could tell that the power during the black long spear's peak could be compared favorably with a peak universe god in the third heavens. It was formed by consciousness entirely, a solid attack. Luckily, the black tortoise shell has weakened by more than half and I have the blood-killing plate armor to protect my body. Otherwise, against the long spear, I definitely would die. Jianghu Shuang was glad. Jianghu Shuang, Xiao is very strong. Stop concealing your power. Otherwise you'll die, King of Venomous Worms said in Jianghu Shuang's head. I understand. Jianghu Shuang nodded. He saw that the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters that Xiao brought had recovered and they could totally join forces with Xiao to fight against him altogether. Secret skill of Star Palace. Jianghu Shuang didn't dare to hold back but performed the secret skill of Star Palace and the power spread across his whole body. I only have 10 breaths time. I can't delay. Make it quick. Jianghu Shuang's face turned cold and the very next moment, he rampaged towards where Xiao was at. Asking for death. Looking at Jianghu Shuang's surprise attack, Xiao smirked coolly. The black long spear in his hand had a layer of light and it flew out again. Rumble. There was a huge black hole in the void again. There was madness in Jianghu Shuang's eyes and there was an enormous amount of soul power soaring out from his sea of consciousness. Inextinguishable light. Swoosh. The silent light attacked again. The only difference was that Jianghu Shuang performed the trick with the secret skill of Star Palace. With the support of the power of Star, the light's power suddenly increased tenfold. The power that Xiao's long spear gave out was equal to an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven, while the inextinguishable light that I performed with my all, along with the support of the power of Star, shouldn't be any weaker than an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven. If they were to collide, they could definitely fight against one another. Jianghu Shuang's gaze was cold and Blood Mountain Sword appeared from nowhere. Blood Mountain Sword. Ever since he entered Soul Master Temple, he kept the sword in Shen Kuan Ring. During the years in Soul Island, he always battles with his soul attack but never once took out Blood Mountain Sword or used any sword technique. Naturally, no one knew that he was also a powerful warrior besides his identity of a soul master. Then he was going to show his warrior power. Bang. A low, soft noise was heard. It wasn't loud, but the sound of large forces colliding came through. The entire battlefield drowned in a huge consciousness storm. It was a chaotic situation. Just then there was a swoosh in the consciousness storm. A figure flew out. Ha! Beishiu stiffened. He took my spear attack directly? Then Beishiu resumed normalcy. If so, let's see how you handle this. Beishiu smirked. This is the first time I have performed this trick after mastering it. You should feel honored. Then there was a bright crimson light that shot out from Beishiu's eyes. The crimson light was just like a scarlet sun, extremely eye-catching. Jianghu Shuang, who was charging towards him, couldn't help but lift his head to watch. The moment he lifted his head, there was a strange strength. Dreamland? Jianghu Shuang immediately came to a realization. Then he smiled. It's such a joke that you're trying to pull me into Dreamland. Jianghu Shuang wasn't affected at all but continued to speed towards him. What? Beishiu was surprised. It was his biggest trump card. He had only mastered it after a long time. However, it didn't have any effect on Jianghu Shuang when he put it to play. How is this possible? He didn't know that Jianghu Shuang had already lit his soul fire. Plus, his soul power was extremely strong and very close to a peak universe god in the third heavens. At times like this, Dreamland and similar techniques like consciousness attacks had to be performed by a real god to have an effect on him. He wasn't afraid of Dreamland at all. He was afraid of a solid attack that was consolidated through consciousness. Just like the long spear that Beishiu used earlier. Although it was played via consciousness, it was solid. Its power equaled an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven that would be able to harm Jianghu Shuang. Beishiu's strongest technique didn't have any effect on Jianghu Shuang, and then he saw Jianghu Shuang holding a sword. Sword? Warrior? Beishiu stared. Chapter 1392 Kill. Chapter 1392, Kill. Buzz. A cold sword light suddenly flashed. During his years in Tianling land, he had been practicing the manipulation method of consciousness. He had almost never used his sword before. His swordsmanship maintained its standard when he was in lineage of Star. His creation stopped at beginner rank 3 unique skill. However, the beginner rank 3 unique skill was still rather scary to a 3-starred soul master. So fast. So furious. There was a flash of shock in Beishiu's eyes. There was suddenly an unprecedented danger that soared from the bottom of his heart. What a soul master feared the most was fighting in close combat with a warrior of the same rank because they were not skilled with close combat. In a normal situation, a peak 3-starred soul master who got approached by a beginner level 3 divine general would likely be killed directly. But then, die. Jianghu Shuang suddenly erupted his divine power, and the sword principle that he performed let out a shrill cry. Although Beishiu immediately formed a layer of consciousness blockage, a ray of sword light broke it like it was breaking dead wood at the very moment that the consciousness blockage was formed. The cold sword light continued to plunge towards Beishiu's skull. Shit. Beishiu's face suddenly changed. Jianghu Shuang, stop. My mother is... Beishiu bellowed, but he had yet to finish his sentence. Psst. The cold sword light stabbed through his throat. Beishiu could barely move his mouth and his eyes grew dim. Jianghu Shuang was filled with a murderous intention. Your mother? You're going to kill me? Why would I care about who your mother is? Jianghu Shuang gripped his Blood Mountain sword in his hand tightly and he looked towards Hui Yi and the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters nearby. Hui Yi and the other 2 peak 3-starred soul masters saw that Beishiu had been killed and they were terrified. Hurry up and run. The 3 of them started running crazily without hesitation. There are still 6 breaths left. Kill all these people altogether. Jianghu Shuang gave them a sharp glare. In the process of killing Beishiu, he had merely used 4 breaths of time. His secret skill of Star Palace was still sufficient to support 6 breaths of time. The 6 breaths of time was for killing the 3 people before him. He knew it'd be enough. Buzz. An enormous amount of blazing quicksand swept out and covered the entire universe. It covered Hui Yi and the other 2 people who were running in a craze. The effect of the quicksand took place and their speed slowed down tremendously. Jianghu Shuang first ran before the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters. Die. There was a murderous intention in Jianghu Shuang's eyes. Without holding back, the moment the 2 people got closer to the secret skill of Tian Yuan, sword light spurted out. According to the strength of his soul power then, even if the secret skill of Tian Yuan wasn't supported by the power of Star, the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters found it hard to resist. With the support of the power of Star, the power of his secret skill increased by tenfold. Ah! The two peak 3-starred soul masters gave out a blood-curdling scream. Then the sword light went through their bodies. After killing the two peak 3-starred soul master, Jian Wushuang moved and came behind Hui Yi. Jian Wushuang, no, Mr. Wushuang, please let me live. Look at our past relationship, let me live. Hui Yi ran as he pleaded for mercy. Past relationship? Such a joke, Jian Wushuang sneered. Hui Yi had schemed against him for Feng Ling Nak. He hadn't taken their relationship into consideration at all. Then he brought up their relationship. Die. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and swept out a ray of sword light. With the assistance of Blaze Quicksand he killed Hui Yi directly. Swoosh. Jian Wushuang finally stopped and the surrounding Blaze Quicksand dispersed. Everything resumed its tranquility. Phew. 10 breaths time, just nice. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh. From the time when he had really fought and performed the secret skill of Star Palace to when he had killed Beishio and the two peak 3-starred soul masters, until he killed Hui Yi in the end, he had used 10 breaths of time. The moment the time was up, his power of Star was exhausted. Hui Yi. Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold when he looked at Hui Yi's dead body. His palm quivered and his body shattered into pieces. Then Jian Wushuang came before Beishio's dead body. Beishio, peak 3-starred soul master, a big figure who has friends in high places in Soul Island. You could recognize 5 beast soul manipulation knack and knew it was hard to come by. It's a pity that you belittled me, Jian Wushuang sounded so cold. Beishio really belittled him. Actually, with Beishio's power he could entirely fight Jian Wushuang face to face. He could even wait till Jian Wushuang's power of Star ran out, then seize the chance to defeat him and kill him. However, from the very beginning, or to be exact, when Beishio saw Jian Wushuang in Soul Island for the very first time, he had already belittled Jian Wushuang. He thought Jian Wushuang was just an ordinary peak 3-starred soul master and he got the 5 beast soul manipulation knack by luck. He thought with his power alone, along with the 2 peak 3-starred soul master, he could easily win against Jian Wushuang. He didn't know that Jian Wushuang wasn't like other ordinary people, but an enduring genius who came from outside of Tianling land and was directly under the command of the lineage of Star. Not only was he a soul master, he was also a terrifying warrior. In his hand he held many trump cards. His consciousness had already transformed into soul power. Everything brought up Jian Wushuang's power, which was extremely fierce. However, for Beishio he never thought of those. Especially when he put his strongest technique to play, Jian Wushuang wasn't affected at all and Beishio was dumbfounded at the sight. Later on, when Jian Wushuang showed his warrior capabilities, it was totally beyond Beishio's imagination. Although he reacted in the moment, he was slightly slow in the end and Jian Wushuang had managed to succeed. However, Jian Wushuang understood that if he were to be an expert from the eternal chaotic world with the same ability, the possibility of him succeeding would be much smaller. Buzz. The same strength swept out and Beishio's dead body was buried in oblivion. Jian Wushuang then took the Chen Kuan ring and long spear that Bei Lu left behind. Consciousness attack long spear. Jian Wushuang first looked at the long spear. The black long spear gave him a mysterious feeling and his senses towards consciousness became stronger. Actually, Beishio's consciousness attack wasn't strong. However, with the support of the long spear, it became terrifying. The long spear is definitely a treasure. Now it's in my hand, Jian Wushuang smiled. He wasn't in a hurry for the long spear to recognize him as an owner, but he looked at the Chen Kuan ring. Beishio has a strong background in Soul Island. I believe his family background wasn't ordinary either. I wonder what other treasures are in his Chen Kuan ring and whether I can use them. Chapter 1393 Leave. Chapter 1393, Leave. With a tinge of excitement, Jian Wushuang started to check the Chen Kuan ring that Beishio had left behind. In his Chen Kuan ring there were various treasures. Many were priceless. Jian Wushuang was astonished. I'm impressed. Although I am a disciple of Star Palace, forgetting the few unique treasures like Mountain River Map, Blood-Killing Plate Armor, Blood Mountain Sword, I can't compare to Beishio, Jian Wushuang gasped in silence. Very soon he was attracted by the 20 crystals in the Chen Kuan ring. Tianling crystal, so many of them? Jian Wushuang was astonished. One would only be able to get it by hunting beasts that were rank 3 and above in the deserted region. There was a total of 20 pieces of desolate crystal, which were extremely precious in Tianling land, in Beixiu's Chen ring. Jian Wushuang's disciple task was to only collect 10 Tianling crystals. Thus, he completed his task in this instance. He even had 10 extra Tianling crystals. We're both peak 3-starred soul masters, but it's totally different when one has background experience and when one doesn't, Jian Wushuang sighed. He already inspected the other 2 peak 3-starred soul masters' Chen ring. However, the treasures in the 2 rings didn't value 1/10 of Beixiu's. This is... Jian Wushuang was suddenly attracted by a wooden slip book that gave out unique energy in the Chen ring. He could feel the uniqueness of the wooden slip book. I wonder what this wooden slip book contains. Jian Wushuang covered it with his soul power immediately. At the very next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were wide open. How could this be? Jian Wushuang was shocked by the contents of the wooden slip book. It was a secret skill. If it were to be any ordinary secret skill or a secret skill that was famous in Tianling land, he wouldn't be shocked. Hence, he only reacted that way because the secret skill was 18 Asura Hell. It is the strongest consciousness attack secret skill created by the top expert in Tianling land, Real God Demonic Rain. It was with Beixiu? Jian Wushuang stared in disbelief. He had heard Feng Tao mention the Real God Demonic Rain before. Real God Demonic Rain started Soul Master Temple and at the same time created Soul Island. Her existence on Tianling land was definitely godlike. The strongest secret skill, 18 Asura Hell that she had created was extremely famous too. However, because Real God Demonic Rain was too aloof, many powerful real gods in Soul Island were not qualified to meet Real God Demonic Rain even once. As for the strongest consciousness attack secret skill created by Real God Demonic Rain, almost no one had seen it before. But then Jian Wushuang found the secret skill left in Beixiu's Chen ring and it was a complete one. Beixiu was famous in Soul Island and everyone knew that he possessed a strong background, but no one knew what sort of background he had. He only knew that real gods in Soul Island were polite to him. Before he died he spoke about his mother. Would his mother be Real God Demonic Rain? Then Jian Wushuang couldn't help but gasp. Actually, judging from the situation where Beixiu possessed 18 Asura Hell, his mother was most likely Real God Demonic Rain. No wonder he could recognize my 5-beast soul manipulation knack. Real God Demonic Rain has been outside of Tianling land, which meant that she had wandered in the eternal chaotic world before. With her power, she was naturally qualified to access 5-beast soul manipulation knack. Beixiu was his son and it was normal that he found out about the 5-beast soul manipulation knack from her. Great, I killed the son of the top expert in Tianling land. Jian Wushuang sighed. Just then. Jian Wushuang, where are you? A message was transmitted. Jian Wushuang stiffened and took out a token. It was the communication token connected with Feng Tao. Feng Tao. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew that Hui Yi had framed him and Feng Tao didn't know anything about it. When Beixiu was dealing with him, he had sent experts to take care of Feng Tao. Jian Wushuang stood there as he looked at the token in his hand. He sighed and suddenly exerted force in his palm. Pack. The communication token suddenly exploded. I killed Beixiu. Although there was no one who saw, if Real God Demonic Rain were to be angry and start to investigate, she might suspect me. Once I'm caught, I won't stand a chance. In other words, Soul Island or even Tianling land is not safe for me. Jian Wushuang knew his situation clearly. Hence, he didn't reply Feng Tao and he even destroyed the communication token. What he was doing was making people think that Beixiu, Hui Yi and the rest of them had disappeared from the deserted region altogether. It would get the best result. He didn't belong in Tianling land. As there was no place for him anyway, he could just leave. I've been in Tianling Mystery Land for almost 300 years, it's time to return, Jian Wushuang smiled. He had come to Tianling Mystery Land for experience and train his soul attack. Then he was at the stage of great achievement for 5-beast soul manipulation knack and he had already reached his goal. Plus, he had already completed the task to collect 10 Tianling crystals. Hence, there was nothing left for him in Tianling Mystery Land. Jian Wushuang immediately tore the token for leaving Mystery Land. The token broke and a space wormhole appeared before Jian Wushuang. Goodbye Tianling land. Jian Wushuang chuckled. He took a leap into the wormhole without hesitation. When there was a flash of light again, Jian Wushuang arrived on the island, that lineage of star control. There were still countless cultivators gathered there to wait for space wormhole to open. After Jian Wushuang had arrived on the island, he immediately returned to Lineage of Stars' old lair. In the resplendent Milky Way, there was Lineage of Stars' old lair. Jian Wushuang saw Hall Master Yuan. "Young man, how did it go in Tianling Mystery Land? Plain sailing?" Hall Master Yuan smiled and looked over. "Quite well." Jian Wushuang smiled and he took out the 10 Tianling crystals. "The task that Hall Master Yuan assigned me has been completed." Hall Master Yuan looked at the 10 Tianling crystals and nodded. "These Tianling crystals are very useful, especially for consciousness and souls. You should keep them as you happen to need them." Jian Wushuang was touched, but he didn't reject. The Tianling crystals were really useful to him. "Looking at you now, you have had a bountiful harvest during the years in Tianling Mystery Land, huh?" Hall Master Yuan looked. Thinking about the gains made over the years, Jian Wushuang revealed a smile. Chapter 1394 on Taiyuan Star. Chapter 1394, on Taiyuan Star. He was in Tianling Mystery Land for almost 300 years. His gains were far beyond his expectations before. At first, he had only intended to improve his manipulation method of soul power and his grasp of 5B soul manipulation knack with the aid of a large number of soul masters in Tianling Mystery Land. He thought it would be good enough if he could achieve the initial success stage for the 5B soul manipulation knack. But then, he was at great achievement stage for 5B soul manipulation knack. On top of that, the battles with various soul masters allowed him to accumulate an abundance of experience. Besides, he had killed Bei Xiu and obtained the Black Long Spear and other treasures. Not forgetting his obtainment of the consciousness attack method 18 Asura Hell. With all of that on hand, he had certainly gained a bounty. "Oh yeah, Hall Palace Yuan. When I was wandering in Tianling Mystery Land, someone talked about the utmost expert in Tianling Mystery Land, real god Demonic Rain. It was said that she left Tianling Mystery Land before to wander in the eternal chaotic world." Jian Wushuang suddenly said. Yes, real god Demonic Rain did wander around the eternal chaotic world before. Even within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries she gained fame. Her consciousness attack was extremely terrifying. Among the real gods who are good at consciousness attack in the eternal chaotic world, she is definitely in the top 5. Especially the 18 Asura Hell that she created, it's extremely impressive. In terms of her overall power, she is on the list of real gods. Although she was slightly lower than Lei Chao, her kind of power is extremely rare. Hall Palace Yuan explained. As expected, Jian Wushuang was impressed. The experts listed on the real gods list were a bunch of real gods that could carry out a massacre. No wonder real god Demonic Rain had been treated so highly in Tianling Land. Real god Demonic Rain also knew that Tianling Mystery Land, where she was under the command of Lineage of Star. She didn't dare to resist. Hence, she once made a deal with Lineage of Star with her identity as an expert in Tianling Mystery Land. The context of the deal was that the disciples from Lineage of Star could enter Tianling Mystery Land for training. Regardless of any treasure that they obtained from Tianling Mystery Land, they can take care of them themselves. Similarly, if the disciples were to die in Tianling Mystery Land, we Lineage of Star couldn't blame the cultivators in Tianling Mystery Land, Hall Master Yuan said. Oh, I see. Jian Wushuang nodded quietly. Jian Wushuang didn't ask further. After having a simple understanding of real god Demonic Rain, he returned to Sword Star. Sword Star. It's been almost 300 years since I last came back. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He couldn't help but crease his eyebrows after he returned to Sword Star. He was a disciple of Star Palace. On Sword Star, he had many maids and servants. However, it was extremely quiet on Sword Star then. When his soul power swept over the place, there was no one. What's going on? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows, then took out a communication token. Qiu Yu? Mister, you came back from the Mystery Land? Qiu Yu replied very quickly. I just got back, Jian Wushuang replied and immediately asked, why, when I returned to Sword Star, is no one here? Where did all of you go? Mister, we are all on Taiyuan Star. Qiu Yu replied. Taiyuan Star? Medicine Garden? What are you all going there? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Nothing. Mr. Bai Lipping needed some assistance and he asked for help, Qiu Yu replied. He looked to you for help? Jian Wushuang found it weird. Wait for me there. I will come to Taiyuan Star now. Jian Wushuang told Qiu Yu and immediately departed to Taiyuan Star. Taiyuan Star was the biggest star in the Lineage of Star formation. Due to its huge area, the lineage of Star set the medicine garden on Taiyuan Star. Many medicinal materials for elixirs that cultivators could use were planted on Taiyuan Star. As it was a medicine garden, it naturally required someone to look after it. Just as Jian Wushuang appeared on Taiyuan Star, he saw a bustling crowd in the huge medicine garden. The crowd was made of maids and servants under his command, including Qiu Yu. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang appeared in the middle of the medicine garden directly. Qiu Yu, Jian Wushuang's voice was heard. Master. Qiu Yu walked over. Master. The maids and servants put down their tasks on hand and bowed politely at Jian Wushuang. You're all my people. Why didn't you stay on Sword Star? Why did you come here? Jian Wushuang looked cold. The maids and servants looked at each other but no one dared to speak. Qiu Yu looked like she was in a difficult position. What's going on exactly? Jian Wushuang looked towards Qiu Yu. Before Qiu Yu replied, there was a figure that plundered out from the void nearby. A bunch of dumbass, how dare you be so lazy? The raging reprimand could be heard before the person arrived. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and he looked at the incomer. The incomer was a bald elderly in a green shirt. The bald elderly had ferocious features. His eyes were cold. He appeared in the void before Jian Wushuang and the rest. He looked at them with a cold gaze. How dare you be lazy before me? It seems like I didn't punish you enough previously and you couldn't remember it, the bald elderly said coldly and took out a green long whip. The long whip was extremely flexible. It looked just like a living cobra. Looking at the bald elderly drawing the long whip, the surrounding maids and servants showed terror in their eyes. Jian Wushuang saw the scene and his pupils contracted. Dumbass, you're really asking for a whipping. The bald elderly bellowed and swung his hand. The cobra-like green, long whip swept out and whipped at the maidservant nearest to him. The maidservant was merely a universe god in the first heaven. She had no power to resist the whip held by the bald elderly. She could only watch the long whip flying towards her body. Just as the long whip was about to reach the maidservant's body, a shapeless strength blocked the maidservant's. That shapeless strength suddenly transformed into a 2-meter-tall giant. The giant swung his hand and grabbed the whip. No matter how forceful the bald elderly was, the long whip wouldn't move an inch. Formation with consciousness. According to Jian Wushuang's manipulation standard of soul power, he could use his soul power and transform them into any shape anytime. It only varied in the strength of its power. What? The bald elderly's face changed and he finally noticed Jian Wushuang's existence. Jian Wushuang then looked extremely cold. Chapter 1395, Lesson. Chapter 1395, Lesson. When he was communicating with Qiu Yu and found out that they were on Taiyuan Star, Jian Wushuang found it fishy. After all, Qiu Yu and the others were their own servants. What they wanted to do was to serve him and help him to take care of Sword Star. Why would they need to work elsewhere? Then, looking at the sight before him, Jian Wushuang didn't need to ask and he understood. Young man, who are you? The bald elderly holding a green whip looked at Jian Wushuang as he squinted his eyes. Sword Star Jian Wushuang spoke coldly. Jian Wushuang? Disciple of Star Palace? The bald elderly was shocked. Although he was a universe god in the third heaven, he wasn't the real disciple of Lineage of Star. In other words, he was just a servant in Lineage of Star. He didn't have any identity token and hence he couldn't feel the aura of disciples of Star Palace on Jian Wushuang. He couldn't feel the token aura but he had heard of Jian Wushuang's name. Even though they were in Lineage of Star, the ordinary disciples didn't bother with Jian Wushuang. However, he wasn't someone a servant could provoke and get involved with. I see. It's Mr. Jian Wushuang. I am Bai Liping, the bald elderly replied humbly. Bai Liping? You're the one who brought my people to Taiyuan Star? Jian Wushuang spoke in a low voice. Mr. Jian Wushuang, I think you misunderstood. I never forced them to work here. They came willingly. You can ask them if you do not believe me, the bald elderly Bai Liping smiled faintly. He wasn't worried that Qiu Yu would tell him the truth because as long as Qiu Yu wasn't stupid, they would know that their owner couldn't possibly provoke his owner. Hence they could only say that they did it willingly. Then the matter would be diminished, which was beneficial for both parties. However, if the truth were to be told and even if Jian Wushuang had the heart to come forward on their behalf, he didn't have the power to. In the end he would only be inviting trouble. Similarly, it wouldn't end well for them either. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and glanced at the people around him. he noticed that the maids and servants had lowered their heads. Even Qiu Yu stopped before she spoke and then lowered her head like everyone else. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised but glared at Bai Liping. He glared at the whip in his hand and said, "Do you think I'm blind? The look like this and you say that they did it willingly?" "Mr. Jian Wushuang," Bai Liping lifted his head and smiled faintly, "I'm working for Mr. Xiaofeng. Mr. Xiaofeng is kind and generous. He knew that we servants have it tough, so he gave us time to cultivate respectively. However, as they were doing so, no one could take care of Taiyuan Star. As such, I asked the people in Sword Star for help. Mr. Xiaofeng did it out of empathy with us servants. We can't reject him. I think even Mr. Jian Wushuang wouldn't want to see Mr. Xiaofeng unhappy, right?" Xiaofeng. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted. He had heard of Xiaofeng. He was also a universe god in the second heaven, and also a disciple of Star Palace. The only difference was that Xiaofeng had proved his identity with his power long ago, but Jian Wushuang, there was almost no one who recognized him to qualify his identity as disciples of Star Palace. So he gave an order for his own people to cultivate, but let the people under my command work for you. That's interesting. Jian Wushuang sneered at him, but his gaze turned cold the very next moment. Forget about the fact if it was Xiaofeng's order. Even if it was, we are both disciples of Star Palace. Without my consent, you forced my people to work here on Taiyuan Star. Does he qualify to do so? Not only did you force my people to work for you, but you also hit my people. There was a sharp glare in Jian Wushuang's eyes and his figure suddenly charged forward. Jian Wushuang appeared before Bai Liping directly, and the latter realized and waited to come to blows. Rumble. A scary soul attack consolidated into a sharp thorn and pierced through Bai Liping's sea of consciousness. Ah! Bai Liping let out a groan in pain. His eyes turned bloodshot and his consciousness drowned in extreme pain. He lost the ability to fight back. Pack. Jian Wushuang's hand slapped Bai Liping's face and Bai Liping flew off. At the same time he grabbed the green whip from Bai Liping's hand. "You dare to whip my people. Let me teach you a lesson today." A cold voice was heard from Jian Wushuang's mouth. He gripped the long whip and swung. The long whip became a soul snake and whipped Bai Liping's body continuously. Pack. The loud whipping sound could be heard clearly, accompanied by Bai Liping's roars and bellows. Bai Liping was a universe god in the third heaven. He wanted to counterattack with his all. However, as Jian Wushuang wielded the long whip, it naturally contained soul attack. Every whip brought Bai Liping into a sluggish situation. He couldn't dodge nor he could match. He could only embrace every whip on him. In just a short while he was whipped by Jian Wushuang more than 100 times. From more than 100 lashes, Bai Liping's clothes were torn and his skin was worn. Some parts of his bone and flesh were mashed up too. He turned into raw flesh and was extremely pathetic, but he was still alive. "Show mercy, Mr. Jian Wushuang. Let me live." Bai Liping started pleading. He had no alternative, he had to ask for mercy. If he didn't, he reckoned he would have died from the whipping that Jian Wushuang gave. Humph. Jian Wushuang whipped Bai Liping's face once and finally stopped. "Listen up. I do not care if it was your personal idea or Xiaofeng's order. Let me keep this short. My people, without my consent, cannot be ordered to do anything." Then Jian Wushuang threw the green whip away. He looked at the maids and servants who were shocked and said, "Let's go back to Sword Star." Qiu Yu and the rest came back to reality. Then they immediately followed Jian Wushuang and left Bai Liping lying there half dead. Sword Star in the lofty palace. What happened during the time I wasn't here? Jian Wushuang sat on the throne overlooking at Qiu Yu and the rest of the people. Qiu Yu knelt down. "Mr. Qiu Yu didn't manage Sword Star well. If Mr. is angry, blame Qiu Yu alone. I do not want to reprimand you. I just want to know what happened." Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. "Tell me." Chapter 1396, 18 Asura Hell. Chapter 1396, 18 Asura Hell. Qiu Yu hesitated and then said, "Mister, you should know that lineage of star determines one's position through his or her ability. The same goes for the deacon elderlies on the highest level as well as the disciples of Star Palace like yourself and the ordinary disciples. The same also applies to us, the maidservants." Qiu Yu briefly explained what happened. Then Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze. "You mean at the very beginning, the one who was seeking trouble with you all was Luo Quan?" "Yes, it was him. Qiu Yu nodded. Luo Quan has been an ordinary disciple all the time, and the ordinary disciples in lineage of star didn't have any maidservants to serve them, nor could they occupy a star. Hence, not long after you went to the Mystery Land, Luo Quan came to Sword Star and said that he needed 2 maidservants to head over to take care of some matters on your behalf. I weighed my options and then agreed as he only wanted 2 maidservants. Then he came again and asked for 10 maidservants. I didn't agree and Luo Quan raised his fists. He brought along the other few ordinary disciples to take our people. We had no choice but to say your name. Who didn't imagine that Luo Quan wouldn't care? He even said that after the battle started your identity as a disciple of Star Palace, including this Sword Star, and we the maid and servants would all belong to him in no time. He was merely taking what would soon belong to him. Oh. There was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He sneered, oh yeah, among all universe gods in the second heaven and lineage of Star, there are only 5 disciples of Star Palace including myself. That's because one of the disciples of Star Palace passed through God's test in the 3rd heaven and became a universe god in the 3rd heaven. The quota for 5 disciples of Star Palace beside myself, the other 4 already proved themselves with their capabilities. Their positions couldn't be shaken. Besides me, the one who was widely recognized as a person who wasn't up to standard. Back when I first came to lineage of Star, Luo Kun defeated me before. Everyone thought I would become an ordinary disciple after the battle to fight for the quota to become a disciple of Star Palace. On the other hand, Luo Quan is the strongest universe god in the 2nd heaven among the ordinary disciples. Naturally, my position as a disciple of Star Palace will be taken by him. Humph, nicely done. Jian Wushuang looked cold and he glared. Where is Luo Quan now? In the lineage of Star? No, Qiu Yu shook her head. Luo Quan went to one of the mystery lands 200 years ago. Because he went to a mystery land we returned to Sword Star. But it wasn't long until Bai Liping forced us to work on Tai Yuan Star. To mystery land? Jian Wushuang shook his head in silence and commanded, Qiu Yu, I won't be on Sword Star for some time. When I'm not here, try not to leave Sword Star. When people come asking for trouble, if it isn't too ridiculous, hold back if you could. Wait till the battle ends and we will take care of it. Yes, Qiu Yu nodded politely. All right, you're dismissed. Jian Wushuang waved and Qiu Yu left with the other maids and servants. In the hall, Jian Wushuang sat alone. Qiu Yu even apologized to me and said that it was all her fault. In actual fact, I was the main reason that all of this happened. Jian Wushuang laughed at himself. The real reason why the maids and servants were bullied was actually because of him as an owner. If the owner were to be powerful and those disciples revered him, naturally no one would dare to seek trouble with them. But the crucial point was that the disciples in lineage of Star, including the ordinary disciples, didn't look up to him. Naturally, they looked down upon his maids and servants. To make people afraid of acting impetuously, he could only rely on his power. The battle is a platform to showcase my power. Only by defeating those ordinary disciples like Luo Quan and Chu Yang during the fight, or even defeating the other 4 disciples of Star Palace, will the people of lineage of Star recognize my identity as a disciple of Star Palace. Battle. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists tightly. This battle was extremely meaningful to him. Then Jian Wushuang didn't opt to wander in another mystery land, nor did he go to cultivation places like Reset Palace or Shrine of Myriad Swords. He stayed back in Sword Star and started cultivating in seclusion. Jian Wushuang only had one goal to cultivate in seclusion, which was to obtain the secret skill of consciousness attack from Beishio. 18 Asura Hell. 18 Asura Hell was the expert on the Real Gods list and the user of Real God Demonic Rain's strongest technique. Even Hall Palace Yuan was impressed with her technique. Of course, Jian Wushuang was dying to master the technique. 18 Asura Hell was a Phantasmagoria secret skill. 18 Asura Hell is segregated into 18 levels of Dreamlands. Jian Wushuang was shocked. But at the same time he understood that when he was fighting with Beishio, the strongest technique that he had pulled in the end was this. However, Beishio had just mastered the technique and he had merely performed the first 3 levels. Most importantly, the 3 Dreamlands performed with Beishio's consciousness was nothing to Jian Wushuang who had already lit up soul power. However, if the same technique were to be performed by Jian Wushuang who had lit his soul power, it would be several times scarier. Of course, Jian Wushuang had to first grasp the technique. 18 levels of Dreamlands, the first 3 levels are barely beginner level. During the first 6 levels, one will still be at the initial success stage. Then, the 12th level would be the Great Achievement stage. Finally, the 18th level would be considered as the complete satisfactory level. Xiu was only at the beginner stage of the secret skill? Jian Wushuang sneered but quickly began understanding the secret skill with his full concentration. 18 level of Dreamlands. He wanted to grasp level by level and try to perform them. First, he must understand that the first level of the 18 levels of Dreamland was Hell of Tongue Removal. That level of Dreamland was the easiest. Plus, Jian Wushuang had already lit up his soul power. It was much easier to understand. Even so, he spent a total of 5 years. 5 years to understand the first level? Jian Wushuang was not satisfied, but he had no choice as he had tried his best. However, if the dead Xiu were to know about it, he would definitely be jealous and go mad. After all, the moment he got the secret skill from his mother, he had been trying to understand. Just for the first level of understanding, he had spent 150 years. On the second level of Dreamland, he had used a total of 600 years. The third level of Dreamland was the longest. He had spent a total of 1,800 years. However, Jian Wushuang grasped the first level in 5 years and he was still complaining that it was too slow? Chapter 1397 Long Gang Mystery Land. Chapter 1397 Long Gang Mystery Land. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang cultivated in seclusion for 310 years. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang's eyes shot open and there was a flash of crimson light that erupted. The crimson light was red like a scarlet star and extremely eye-catching. Back when Xiu had performed the trick, his eyes had turned into the scarlet sun as well. However, the color wasn't as significant as Jian Wushuang's. After 310 years in seclusion, I'm finally at the initial success stage for 18 Asura Hell, Jian Wushuang smiled. The initial success stage for 18 Asura Hell meant that Jian Wushuang could get through the first 6 levels of Dreamland. 310 years to master the first 6 levels. One must know that Xiu took almost 3,000 years to just master the first 3 levels. 18 Asura Hell, 18 levels of Dreamland. The higher the level, the more difficult it was to master. Although I have mastered the first 6 levels, it will still take more than 100 years for me to understand the 7th level. However, it is less than 100 years until the battle. Jian Wushuang smiled but didn't intend to continue to cultivate in seclusion. After all, merely the first 6 levels were already terrifying enough. Jian Wushuang, the secret skill that you obtained, although it was only a consciousness attack and not a soul attack, it is still powerful and it increases your fighting power tremendously. If you were to perform this trick during the fight, one whose consciousness strength hasn't reached the level of a peak universe god in the 3rd heaven could barely resist it, King of Venomous Worms said. That should be right. However, even if one can withstand it, if they can't shake off the phantasmagoria, the ending will be the same, Jian Wushuang smiled. The scary thing about Dreamland was that not only would one drown in phantasmagoria, but also when one tribe was busy trying to shake off the phantasmagoria, Jian Wushuang could still take action and kill the person. Hence, not only did the person have to resist Dreamland, but he also had to shake off the phantasmagoria quickly in order to dodge Jian Wushuang's sword attack. With this technique, you can fight calmly in the upcoming battle. You also have the confidence to maintain your identity as a disciple of Star Palace, King of Venomous Worms laughed. I'm confident, not definite, Jian Wushuang shook his head. Eternal Chaotic World was very different from Tianling Land. In Tianling Land, he could kill a 3-starred Soul Master who was comparable to a peak level 3 Divine General. However, in Eternal Chaotic World, he could merely match evenly with an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven with consciousness attacks. It was hard to say if he could match evenly with a peak universe god in the 3rd heaven. His soul strength was merely at the level of an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven after all. Jian Wushuang, what do you plan to do next? King of Venomous Worms asked. There's less than 100 years' time. I will still figure out ways to improve my power during this period. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist. The mystery lands under Lineage of Stars control, I only went to the least dangerous Tianling Mystery Land. There are 3 other mystery lands that I have yet to visit. There will be many opportunities in the 3 mystery lands and the training effect will be more significant. With the remaining time, I'll select one of the mystery lands. Jian Wushuang made his decision and immediately went to see Hall Master Yuan. When Hall Master Yuan found out that Jian Wushuang wanted to depart to another mystery land, he wasn't shocked and he assigned another Star Palace disciple task for Jian Wushuang, just like the last time. Very soon Jian Wushuang left for the mystery land. one of the 4 mystery lands that Lineage of Star controlled, Longgang Mystery Land. Longgang Mystery Land's danger level was in the 2nd place among the 4 mystery lands. There were massacres all over. There were countless cultivators and ferocious beasts. The cultivators and ferocious beasts were born enemies. The 2 tribes had extremely unique ways of improving their power. Human cultivators improved their power by taking in the ferocious beast's soul nuclei, while the ferocious beasts consume human lives to increase their level. Under such prerequisites, it was only right and proper that the 2 tribes killed one another. After Jian Wushuang had arrived at Longgang Mystery Land, he soon became one of the members of the group of human adventurers. He followed a hunting troop and barged into the ferocious beast's land. Then they started their hunting trip. Of course, Jian Wushuang hunted ferocious beasts only for training and to complete his Star Palace disciple task, while the others in the troop were aiming for the ferocious beast's soul nuclei for improving their powers. The mad massacre was ongoing. Jian Wushuang worked hard to improve his swordsmanship with the training. As for his soul power, after he had arrived in Longgang Mystery Land, unless he was in a life-threatening situation, he wouldn't use his soul attack. He didn't even practice the 5B soul manipulation knack. He let his soul power maintain itself in a totally relaxed state. Yes, he wanted his soul power to be in a relaxed state. He didn't cultivate to improve it or perform any attack with soul power. He did not stimulate his soul power in any way. 90 years passed in such relaxed state. After 90 years, on a remote mountain, Jian Wushuang sat alone. It's about time. I should leave. That day, Jian Wushuang had decided to leave Longgang Mystery Land and return to Lineage of Star. After he had returned to Lineage of Star and passed down the task that Hall Master Yuan assigned to him, he came to Star Tower. I was in Longgang Mystery Land for 90 years. My swordsmanship and close combat skills improved tremendously. I wonder how far am I from the 2nd floor of Star Tower? Jian Wushuang stepped foot into Star Tower excitedly. On the 2nd floor of Star Tower, Jian Wushuang was fighting against the cold-looking middle-aged man again. Just like the 1st floor, the cold-looking middle-aged man held his sword and performed an advanced rank 3 unique skill. However, the same advanced rank 3 unique skill, but the power was a few fold stronger than the 1st floor. His combat technique and experience was far beyond the 1st floor too. When Jian Wushuang passed through the 1st floor back then, he had pulled a lot of tricks. But then he had become more powerful and came to challenge the 2nd floor again. He fought with the cold-looking middle-aged man for a longer time frame, but in the end, with a flick of the wrist, the cold-looking middle-aged man moved the shapeless universe and the sword light hit Jian Wushuang's chest. Jian Wushuang was defeated again. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised by the result. Star Tower, every floor is a huge step forward. I barely passed through the 1st level back then. Although my swordsmanship and killing technique improved, I was far from passing through the 2nd floor. I would still need time to cultivate, Jian Wushuang thought, but he wasn't demotivated. After all, he had improved significantly compared to when he had first come to Lineage of Star. Then Jian Wushuang came to the Illusionary Mind Sea. Chapter 1398 Challenging Illusionary Mind Sea. Chapter 1398 Challenging Illusionary Mind Sea. Illusionary Mind Sea was a training ground that could be tied with Star Tower and Lineage of Star. The difference was that Star Tower focused on unique skill and killing techniques while Illusionary Mind Sea focused on consciousness. Jian Wushuang stayed in the Lineage of Star for so many years. He had been to Star Tower many times, but it was his first visit to the Illusionary Mind Sea. There was a total of 30 floors in Illusionary Mind Sea. On the 1st floor, Jian Wushuang saw a boundless crimson ocean. In the crimson ocean, there was an enormous amount of scarlet sea water raging with anger. There was a unique force flowing over from all directions simultaneously. When I was in Longgang Mystery Land, I let my soul power remain at its most relaxed state so that I could be at ease entirely. Illusionary Mind Sea could let my soul power tense up again. The looseness and the tension is the only chance for me to break through the bottleneck. 30 floors of Illusionary Mind Sea, let's see how far I can go. There were shocking lights surging in Jian Wushuang's eyes. His figure sped off like lightning and ignored the phantasmagoria on the 1st floor but came before the 2nd Crimson Ocean, which was the 2nd floor of Illusionary Mind Sea. The phantasmagoria swept towards him from all directions. Phantasmagoria of such a level won't affect me at all. Jian Wushuang's footsteps didn't slow down at all, but he continuously passed through the 1st floor, the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor. He didn't even slow down when he got to the 10th floor. At the 13th floor, Jian Wushuang finally slowed down slightly. However, he was still rather fast. He also passed through the 13th and 14th floor easily. On the 15th floor he paused for a while but continued to pass through. On the 16th floor it was extremely pressuring for him. He put in all his effort and bellowed madly. He then finally shook off the phantasmagoria. The 17th floor. This is? Jian Wushuang looked at his surrounding. Rumble. The terrifying rumble reverberated in the entire battlefield. The extremely huge fortress shattered entirely and there were dead bodies all over. A large number of experts were on a rampage. Haha, kill everyone in this realm. Merely a green fire world, how dare you dream of occupying such a treasure? You're asking for it. Don't let anyone go. A large number of universe gods, real gods, even almighty were rampaging across the battlefield. They were killing all the cultivators of green fire world. The entire green fire world shattered. Shit, my green fire world is doomed. No. Pathetic groans and wails were heard from every corner. Jian Wushuang was in the middle of the battlefield. Jian Wushuang. Emperor Tang ran before Jian Wushuang with his hair in disarray. He shouted with rage, "You brought a bunch of experts to green fire world? You betrayer. Jian Wushuang, it's your fault. You attracted all these experts here. Our green fire world was destroyed because of you. Jian Wushuang, you're the one to blame for what happened to green fire world." Countless roars reverberated in the universe. Jian Wushuang clenched tightly. Phantasmagoria. This is fake. No matter how realistic the scene is, fake will always be fake. It's merely phantasmagoria. Don't think of affecting me. Break. Jian Wushuang flushed and his face was distorted in agony. He looked terrifyingly ferocious and his eyes were twinkling with unprecedented madness. In his sea of consciousness, his lit soul power started vibrated crazily. Under such madness, the soul power in his sea of consciousness also vibrated vigorously. The surrounding images started quivering vigorously and trembling in the balance too. Just a little bit more, just slightly more. Break. Break. Jian Wushuang bellowed. His fingertips dug deep into his flesh and he started bleeding. Suddenly, rumble. His sea of consciousness quivered and Jian Wushuang suddenly trembled. The surrounding images collapsed entirely. On the 17th floor of Illusionary Mind Sea, on the billowing crimson ocean, Jian Wushuang stood. His body was covered with sweat and he was panting with his head hung low. He looked like he was having a fit. However, even so, there was happiness in Jian Wushuang's eyes. I broke through. I really broke through. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and his entire body shivered in excitement. 90 years ago, he had seen that the strength of his soul power remained on the level of an advanced universe god in the third heaven and couldn't break through, and he had been thinking of a way. For 90 years in Longgang Mystery Land, he had intentionally let his soul power remain at its most relaxed state and he had never once triggered his soul power. 9 years of relaxation and he had came to Illusionary Mind Sea right before the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace, then utilized the Phantasmagoria in Illusionary Mind Sea to stimulate his soul power that was relaxing all this while so that his soul power would suddenly tense up. Such strong stimulation after relaxation, there was a possibility that his soul power would break through. Jian Wushuang was merely making an attempt. Who knew it would really work? The strength of his soul power had already broken through and he had reached the level of peak universe god in the third heaven. His ability was enhanced tremendously with the breakthrough. Jian Wushuang, you have guts. Although your soul power might break through under such strong stimulation, it could also severely damage your soul or even affect your soul fire. Fortunately, you're lucky and you broke through. Otherwise, King of Venomous Worm's voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang was glad. King of Venomous Worms knew what he thought and he told him about the risks. He was really lucky. Regardless, it's the best to be able to break through the bottleneck of soul power before the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and he was overjoyed. Then, Jian Wushuang naturally continued to the 18th floor of the Illusionary Mind Sea. As he had just broken through on the 17th floor, his endurance for Phantasmagoria was naturally stronger. The 18th floor couldn't threaten him. He passed through the 18th floor. As for the 19th floor, he passed through it. But on the 20th floor, Jian Wushuang reckoned the strength of Phantasmagoria would affect any ordinary real god too. He naturally couldn't resist it. In the end he stopped at the 20th floor. In the depth of Illusionary sea mind, on the hillock at the border of the 30th sea region, there was an elegant elderly with crimson long hair seated. The elegant elderly was a deacon elderly who was in charge of taking care of the Illusionary mind sea. Ha! The elegant elderly who was originally drinking alone suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance with his lightning-like eyes. Chapter 1399, The Battle Began. Chapter 1399, The Battle Began. The 19th floor? The elegant elderly looked shocked. There was a total of 30 floors in Illusionary mind sea. From the 20th floor onwards, only consciousness strength at a real god's level could pass through. However, as he had passed through the 19th floor, it meant that his consciousness strength was at the peak of a universe god's. If the person who had passed the 19th floor was a disciple who was a universe god in the third heaven in lineage of star, the elegant elderly wouldn't have been surprised. However, Jianghu Shuang was obviously just a universe god in the second heaven according to his aura. A universe god in the second heaven passed through the 19th floor. Such a terrifying consciousness. The elegant elderly complimented in silence. It's been a while since there was a person with impressive consciousness like this young man in lineage of star. I have to report to Hall Master Yuan immediately. The elegant elderly immediately sent a message to Hall Master Yuan. Hall Master Yuan, who received the message, showed an interested expression. Jianghu Shuang. Although he is an inverse cultivator, he is merely a universe god in the first heaven. His soul power strength has reached such a level. Tiske, it seems that the battle to fight to be a disciple of Star Palace will be very interesting. Lineage of Star, the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace that happens every 5,000 years is finally here. On that day the entire lineage of Star was boiling with excitement. In the middle of the boundless Milky Way there was a floating star. The star was named Titanic Star. Although Titanic Star was said to be a star, it was actually an empty land that was floating. The land was the battle ring itself. At that very moment, a large number of spectators from lineage of Star surrounded Titanic Star. The crowd was crazily huge. These people were made of higher-ups in lineage Star, disciples who were universe gods in the first to third heaven. At the same time, there were maids and servants who had gathered there too. No one wanted to miss the battle that happened every 5,000 years. Jianghu Shuang also appeared at the border of Titanic Star. Once he had appeared, he could feel a few burning gazes. Jianghu Shuang looked and he suddenly understood. The few owners of those burning gazes were all ordinary disciples who were universe gods in the second heaven, and they hoped to fight for the quota to be a disciple of Star Palace during this battle. Among them, the one who had the best chance was Luo Quan. They are eyeing me. I guess they are dying to get my quota to be a disciple of Star Palace. Jianghu Shuang smiled faintly, then he closed his eyes. After all of the disciples gathered around Titanic Stars. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. A dozen figures descended simultaneously. The one leading was, of course, Hall Master Yuan. The one next to Hall Master Yuan was Lei Chao. They were followed by a dozen deacon elderlies. It's about time. Let's begin. Begin from universe gods in the first heaven, Hall Master Yuan ordered. The disciples who were universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of Star then appeared on Titanic Star. There were a total of about 40 people. There are quite a number of them. Jianghu Shuang opened his eyes and took a look at the Titanic Star. Jianghu Shuang, you were supposed to be among these people, King of Venomous Worms said. Me? Jianghu Shuang smiled. In terms of realm, he was merely a universe god in the first heaven. It wasn't because he wanted to hide his identity as an inverse cultivator, he was really supposed to join the battle as a universe god in the first heaven. It was a pity that inverse cultivation was a piece of important news and it couldn't be exposed easily. Hence, Jianghu Shuang could only pretend to be a universe god in the second heaven. Naturally, he had to join the battle among universe god in the second heaven. After those disciples who were universe gods in the first heaven appeared on Titanic Star, there was immediately a space wormhole which popped up. Then Hall Master Yuan spoke. Just like the battle 5,000 years ago, the rotation battle is carried out in 2 rounds. In the first round, everyone takes turn to challenge in the Supreme Tower. Depending on your performance in the Supreme Tower, the Deacon Elderlies and I will watch. We will then pick the top 10 to participate in the second round of the rotation battle after everyone has passed through the Supreme Tower. Let's begin. The rules of the battle were the same as before. the disciples understood and they didn't have any questions. Very quickly, universe gods in the first heaven passed through the wormhole, one after another, to enter the Supreme Tower. The process took over an hour as there were 40 geniuses who had to go through the Supreme Tower one by one. After that, Hall Master Yuan announced the results straightway. Duan Tianhong Yu Jiang Qiu Yu, Hall Master Yuan read 10 names. The 10 of you can proceed to the second round of rotation battle. Once the result was announced, those whose name was read were delighted while those whose name weren't read were disappointed. The 10 of you are the top 10 who stayed in the Supreme Tower for the longest. Jian Wushuang watched the scene calmly. He knew that although it was decided by Hall Master Yuan and those deacon elderlies, in a normal situation, the duration that one stayed in the Supreme Tower would reveal the result. Of course, it was not definite. The rotation battle's rules were even simpler. The 10 geniuses fought one-on-one. Everyone would fight a battle with another person. In other words, everyone would fight 9 battles and the ranking would be decided according to the winning and losing of the battles. The first 5 would be disciples of Star Palace. Every battle would be entitled to extra grants. The higher the ranking, the more one received. The rotation battle began and the 10 geniuses took turns to fight with the other 9 disciples. As the rotation battles were carried out on Titanic Star, the surrounding spectators were naturally noisier than the first round which was carried out in the Supreme Tower. Especially when the fight was between 2 geniuses that were evenly matched. The crowd would cheer when the fight was ferocious. Jian Wushuang watched the rotation battle calmly. In his body, King of Venomous Worms laughed creepily. Jian Wushuang, are you upset? Do you feel aggravated? If you were to join the battle as a universe god in the first heaven, there would be no suspense and you could easily win. But now you can only watch. Even if I join the battle as a universe god in the second heaven, it doesn't mean that I can't win. What's there to be upset about? Jian Wushuang didn't care. It's great that you have such an attitude. You must aim high. To fight with these universe gods in the first heaven, you wouldn't feel pressure at all. If you were to win the first place among universe god in the second heaven when you are only a universe god in the first heaven, that's truly impressive. King of Venomous Worms said. First? Jian Wushuang contracted his pupils but didn't say much. The battle speed among universe gods in the first heaven was rather fast. In 2 hours, the 10 universe gods in the first heaven had completed 9 fights each. Chapter 1400 Ling Feibai. Chapter 1400, Ling Feibai. Everyone watched the rotation battles. The genius named Duan Tianhong won all 9 battles. He naturally became the first among universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of Star. He and the other 4 disciples among the top 5 became disciples of Star Palace. The battle among universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of Star ended then. There was discussion in the surroundings of Titanic Star. Duan Tianhong is strong as usual. He got his quota to be a disciple of Star Palace, winning first place during the last session, and it's the same for this session as well. I heard that he would be going through his God's test in the second heaven. Once he passes through it, he will become a disciple of Universe God in the second heaven. By then, it would be hopeless for him to get the first place in the battle. To be able to win the first place for the battle is impressive enough. Everyone was astonished. At the beginning of the battle, the disciples of Star Palace and ordinary disciples would take part. If one were to perform a failing power, the disciples of Star Palace might be degraded into an ordinary disciple while the ordinary disciples might stand a chance to become disciples of Star Palace. Considering the current session's participants, it was expected that the 5 quotas for the disciples of Star Palace were within everyone's abilities. When the battle among universe gods in the first heaven ended, it would naturally be followed by a battle amongst universe gods in the second heaven. All disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven, please come forward. A deacon elderly gathered them on Titanic Star. All of the disciples who were universe gods in the second heaven and the few disciples of Star Palace, including Jian Wushuang, stepped foot on Titanic Star one after another. Disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of Star are more than universe gods in the first heaven? Jian Wushuang looked around. Including himself, there was a total of 52 universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of Star. Some of the disciples stayed in Mystery Land or wandered outside for a long time. Some cultivated in seclusion. Hence, Jian Wushuang didn't see them much. Until before the battle started, these disciples were gathered together. 52 genius disciples fighting for only 5 quotas of disciples of Star Palace. The four of them. Jian Wushuang looked at four people in the crowd. The four of them were like him, disciples of Star Palace. The one that most revered was a handsome youth. The handsome youth had a gentle smile that people found friendly. However, everyone around him knew how scary that person was. He's the strongest amongst the disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of Star, Ling Feibai. Jian Wushuang looked at the handsome youth and his pupils contracted. In the past years of him staying in lineage of Star, he had found out about the top geniuses in lineage of Star. Amongst universe gods in the second heaven, Ling Feibai was undeniably the top. Just like Duan Tianhong who had won first place among universe gods in the first heaven. Maybe even scarier. It is said that Ling Feibai once fought a peak universe god in the third heaven when he was wandering outside. In the end they were tied. Jian Wushuang recalled his fighting results and gasped in silence. A universe god in the second heaven who was on par with a peak universe god in the third heaven. Ling Feibai wasn't an inverse cultivator. With his fighting result he wasn't looked down upon. There were many disciples who were universe gods in the second heaven who treated Ling Feibai as a true monster. No one had the guts to fight against him. Of course, among those people Jian Wushuang was not included. Ling Feibai, I really want to fight him. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands together and smiled faintly. Besides Ling Feibai, the other three disciples of Star Palace weren't weak either. Amongst them there was Xia Feng who had bad beef with Jian Wushuang. He was extremely powerful too. However, besides the few disciples of Star Palace, the rest of the people, even the strongest among ordinary disciples, Luo Kuan-yi Jian Wushuang didn't care about. It is needless for me to say the rules. Whoever's name is called, please head over to the tower. The deacon elderly's voice spread and he started reading names, first Lu Yun. Then the ordinary disciple Lu Yun, whose name was called, immediately walked towards the wormhole and stepped into it. After she entered the wormhole she came out in a few breaths' time. When she came out she looked like a mess and she looked embarrassed too. Next, a disciple entered the tower. Most of them stayed in the tower for about 10 breaths' time. It was the standard of a normal ordinary disciple. Those who were more outstanding such as Luo Quan, Lu Han and the other few, stayed for more than 15 breaths' time in the tower. As for the few disciples of Star Palace, they performed even better. Especially Ling Feibai. Virum. When Ling Feibai came out from the wormhole, it was dead silent in the Titanic Star. Everyone looked at Ling Feibai in astonishment. There was surge of emotion in everyone's heart. 41 breaths' time. He stayed in the tower for 41 breaths' time. Oh my God. Besides him, the other one who performed the best among the disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven merely stayed in the tower for 20 breaths' time. This is unheard of. Ling Feibai is so scary. Everyone was shocked. Everyone found it unbelievable. Ling Feibai's performance was too astonishing. This young man, Xia Feng in the scarlet robe, who was a disciple of Star Palace, shook his head in silence. He obviously couldn't be compared favorably. That monster, Luo Quan gasped in silence. He was the top among the ordinary disciples. In the battle, he stood a chance to grab the quota to be a disciple of Star Palace. However, even if he became a disciple of Star Palace, he wasn't bold enough to challenge Ling Feibai. He stayed in the tower for 41 breaths' time. Ling Feibai is really amazing, Jian Wushuang complimented. The battle continued and the disciples entered the tower one after another. Soon it was Jian Wushuang's turn. Next, Jian Wushuang. Along with the deacon elderly's calling, everyone's gazes suddenly fixed on Jian Wushuang. Those gazes were strange. Among them were some who were sneering, taunting and making fun of him. Look, disciples in Star Palace, our senior Jian Wushuang is here. Jian Wushuang? I have been wandering in Mystery Land, I didn't know him. But when I returned, I saw the mirror images of him fighting with other disciples. I've got to ask, how did he even qualify to be a disciple of Star Palace? Who knows? It doesn't matter now. He will become an ordinary disciple after the battle. Chapter 1401, Supreme Tower. Chapter 1401, Supreme Tower. The disciples on Titanic Star were chatting casually. They did nothing to conceal their conversation and Jian Wushuang heard them clearly. Jian Wushuang looked cold and he couldn't be bothered with their conversation so he walked into the wormhole straight away. Virum. There was a flash of light and Jian Wushuang appeared in a dark palace. The palace was extremely spacious. He couldn't see the end of it with his naked eyes. In the middle of the palace, there were 3 figures standing in line. The 3 of them hold a saber each. War puppet. Jian Wushuang looked at the 3 tall, sturdy figures before him. The 3 training places in Lineage of Star. I've tried Star Tower and Illusionary Mind C, but I've never tried Supreme Tower before. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hand. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 figures moved simultaneously. They took one step and appeared before Jian Wushuang instantly. Then they slashed. The 3 swords descended at the same time. Jian Wushuang stood there, but he didn't block with his sword. There was a surge of soul power that flowed out and suddenly gathered to become a black tortoise. It covered Jian Wushuang's body and performed its terrifying defense power. Dang, dang, dang. The 3 slashes were blocked by the black tortoise shell. At the same time, the counter-impact sent the 3 war puppet backwards. How could the attack power of the 3 war puppets be so weak? Jian Wushuang was shocked. However, Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows again very soon. That's not right, their power is increasing constantly. I see. The power of the war puppet would have increased along with the passing of time. No wonder the longer one stays in Supreme Tower, the more powerful one is. Jian Wushuang understood and his soul power swept out the next moment. It then formed into 3 soul thorns and shot towards the 3 war puppets. The 3 soul thorns flew through the war puppets' bodies without any hindrance, but it didn't have any effect on the 3 war puppets. The 3 war puppets continued to charge towards him at a terrifying speed. My opponents are war puppets and they are dead. They don't have any consciousness. My soul attack has no effect on them at all. Jian Wushuang's face grew grave. What he was good at wasn't swordsmanship and close combat power but soul attacks. However, in Supreme Tower, in a situation where his opponents were war puppets, he was obviously at a disadvantage. A major disadvantage. My magic and any other attack that aims at spirit or consciousness are useless. I can only depend on 5 beast soul manipulation knack to do consolidated attack. Jian Wushuang's eyes were giving out electric sparks and he waved his hands. Roar. An earth-shattering roar was heard, then there were 3 huge purple tigers that charged towards the 3 war puppets like lightning. On Titanic Star, the disciples were waiting in silence. In the Milky Way, Hall Master Yuan and the dozen Deacon Elderlies were waiting as they focused on what was happening in Supreme Tower. Although there wasn't any image, the Deacon Elderlies could see what was going on in Supreme Tower clearly. At that very moment, the Deacon Elderlies looked surprised. A consciousness attack? Such a strong consciousness attack. Among universe gods in the second heaven in Lineage of Star, there is one who is good with consciousness attacks. He is very impressive in performing the consciousness attack. The Deacon Elderlies were all powerful real gods. Everyone had great foresight and they could tell that Jian Wushuang was giving play to an unusual consciousness attack. However, they didn't recognize that it was 5 beast soul manipulation knack. This young man is Jian Wushuang who Lei Bao brought back not long ago, right? The Deacon Elderlies looked at Lei Chao. It's him, Lei Chao nodded. I thought that the young man was extremely weak and didn't qualify to be a disciple of Star Palace? But now... The Deacon Elderlies had a strange look. Previously, Jian Wushuang's matter had stirred a commotion in Lineage of Star. Many Deacon Elderlies were shocked and there were even Deacon Elderlies that suspected before. Dealing with the suspicion, Hall Master Yuan didn't explain much and merely told them to judge by the outcome of the battle. Then the matter was brushed off. But then Jian Wushuang's power showed in Supreme Tower had exceeded their expectations. Everyone might not know that Jian Wushuang passed through the 19th floor in Illusionary Mind C few days ago, Hall Master Yuan said with a smile. 19th floor. Doesn't it mean that his consciousness strength has reached the level of a peak universe god in the third heaven? The Deacon Elderlies were dumbfounded, and then they understood why Jian Wushuang was qualified to be a disciple of Star Palace. Time flew past and Jian Wushuang walked out from Supreme Tower soon. When he appeared on Titanic Star, the surrounding disciples looked at him with astonishment. 17 breaths. Jian Wushuang had stayed in the Supreme Tower for 17 breaths? 17 breaths already surpassed most of the disciples. As for the duration in Supreme Tower, he should be on the 11th. 800 years ago he was at the bottom among all ordinary disciples. But now he is at the 11th? the disciples found it unbelievable. Of course there were people who didn't care. Such as the 4 disciples of Star Palace, such as Luo Quan, Lu Han, and a few top ordinary disciples who couldn't be bothered. 17 breaths, not too shabby. Unfortunately, he won't even have a chance to join the second round, Luo Quan smirked. Jian Wushuang has improved quite greatly within the 800 years. Lu Han stole a glance at Jian Wushuang but sneered. However, he only stayed in the tower for 17 breaths while I stayed in the tower for 18 breaths. I'm stronger than he is. Among all the disciples that participated, I am at the 10th. If there's no surprises, I will be among the 10 disciples who join the second round. As for Jian Wushuang, on the 11th he will be eliminated. The 10 disciples who joined the second round of rotation battle were normally foreseen according to the duration they stayed in Supreme Tower. The duration he had stayed in the tower was longer than Jian Wushuang. Hence, he naturally thought that he definitely would be joining the second round of rotation battle, rather than Jian Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang, there were a few disciples who also got into the tower. Very soon, all 52 universe gods in the second heaven went through the tower. Next, Hall Master Yuan and the Deacon Elderlies discussed in the boundless Milky Way and then went to announce the results. Chapter 1402, I Refuse to Accept. Chapter 1402, I Refuse to Accept. In the boundless Milky Way Hall Palace, Yuan, Lei Chao and the other dozens of Deacon Elderly gathered together. I drafted a disciple name list of who is going to join the second rotation battle. Look and see if there's any problem. Hall Master Yuan showed the name list to everyone. In Hall Master's point of view, his drafted name list naturally wouldn't have any problems. The Deacon Elderlies only casually took a glance and they agreed in unison. The name list in their heart was the same as the name list that Hall Master Yuan showed them. As there's no problem, let me announce the results. Hall Palace Yuan took a stride and his lofty voice reverberated throughout the entire Titanic Star. Whoever's name is called up can join the second round of the rotation battle. Every disciple in Titanic Star held their breath and waited. Ling Feibai. Ling Feibai was the first who was called. No one was surprised. He was widely acknowledged as the top genius. Then the other 3 disciples of Star Palace were called, including Xia Feng. They were followed by Luo Quan and the others. Hall Palace Yuan read 9 names altogether. At the 10th he paused slightly. Hall Master Yuan had yet to read out the name, but disciples on Titanic Star couldn't help but look towards Lu Han. Everyone saw their performance in Supreme Tower more clearly. As for the duration they stayed in Supreme Tower, Lu Han was at the 10th. In other words, the last person's name should be his. According to the duration one stayed in Supreme Tower, the last name is definitely mine, Lu Han was confident. Hall Master Yuan finally spoke. The last one. Jian Wushuang. Just as he finished the announcement, all the disciples on Titanic Star were surprised. Lu Han, who was full of confidence, suddenly flushed with anger. Jian Wushuang? How could it be Jian Wushuang? Lu Han roared. His bloodshot eyes fixed their gaze on Jian Wushuang. However, he saw Jian Wushuang stood there coldly and didn't bother with his gaze or the surrounding crowd's gaze. No, impossible. Lu Han started bellowing in anger. According to the duration we stayed in Supreme Tower, I stayed for 1 breath longer than Jian Wushuang. I am above him. How could the last quota for second rotation battle not be my name, but his? This is unfair. I refuse to accept this. Lu Han's bellows reverberated through the entire Titanic Star and many disciples creased their eyebrows. Most of these disciples agreed with what Lu Han said. When Jian Wushuang first came to Lineage of Star and showed his ability, it had stirred up a commotion in Lineage of Star. A disciple of Star Place was far behind an ordinary disciple of the same rank. By then, most of them already found it unfair. However, due to the battle approaching, the commotion subsided. Then, before everyone's eyes, everyone could tell that Lu Han had stayed longer than Jian Wushuang in the Supreme Tower. But the last quota was still given to Jian Wushuang. It was not only Lu Han who had refused to accept the result, but the other disciples too. Lu Han even glared at Hall Master Yuan and other higher-ups in the boundless Milky Way. He continued to rage, "This is not fair, I will not accept this." Although even if he were to participate in the second rotation battle, it was impossible for him to grab the quota to become disciples of Star Palace. At least he tried. But then he didn't even have a chance. Plus, if Jian Wushuang did win against him with his ability, so be it. The most important part was that Jian Wushuang obviously couldn't compare favorably with him in regards of duration in Supreme Tower. Of course he refused to accept it. Looking at the scene on Titanic Star, Hall Master Yuan squinted his eyes while the other Deacon Elderlies looked embarrassed. The result was a mutual decision of Hall Master Yuan and all the Deacon Elderlies. We all agreed that Jian Wushuang is more qualified to participate in the second rotation battle than you, Lu Han, one of the Deacon Elderlies shouted. Mutual decision? All the disciples on Titanic Star stunned. If it was only Hall Master Yuan who was biased, so be it. But all the Deacon Elderlies had mutually agreed with the result. It couldn't be that all the Deacon Elderlies were biased, right? Lu Han. A cold voice was heard. The one who spoke was Lei Chao. Mr. Lei Chao. Lu Han quivered and there was a flash of terror in his eyes. I know that you stayed longer in the Supreme Tower than Jian Wushuang. You think that he couldn't be compared favorably to you, so it's normal that you refuse to accept the result. However, if you're unhappy with the result, you can continue to watch the battle. Watch the second rotation battle and see Jian Wushuang's power with your own eyes. Complain then. Now, Hall Master Yuan just announced the result and you question the result. You have guts. Do you think you're Ling Feibai? Lei Chao's voice was cold. Lu Han quivered in shock and he suddenly awakened. True. Regardless, he was merely an ordinary disciple in lineage of Star. There were many ordinary disciples of his standard in lineage of Star. Then he who was an ordinary disciple pointed a finger at Hall Master Yuan and questioned the result of the discussion amongst Hall Master Yuan and the other Deacon Elderlies. Am I crazy? Lu Han quivered. Then Hall Master Yuan finally looked down at Lu Han. His voice was extremely cold too. Stand by the side and watch. If, when the second rotation battle ends, you still think that Jian Wushuang shouldn't be compared favorably with you, I will give you what you deserve and I will apologize to everyone and admit that I'm biased. However, if Jian Wushuang were to be stronger than you, then you will return to where you came from. Then everyone on Titanic Star gasped and looked at Lu Han simultaneously. Return to where you came from. It meant that he would be kicked out from lineage of Star. Lu Han was extremely shocked. He mumbled but couldn't utter another word. All right, be prepared for the second rotation battle, Hall Master Yuan waved his hand impatiently. Along with Hall Master Yuan's instruction, the battle continued. After the chaos that Lu Han caused, everyone who was originally still doubtful of Jian Wushuang's capability didn't dare to think so anymore. Hall Master Yuan and the rest of the Deacon Elderlies think that Jian Wushuang is stronger than Lu Han. If it was just Hall Master Yuan, it wouldn't be a big deal. The crucial part is that all Deacon Elderlies thought so too. It definitely isn't because Hall Master Yuan is biased but Jian Wushuang really has the ability. Definitely. Otherwise, why would Hall Master Yuan say so and even promise to apologize publicly? From what I can see, Hall Master Yuan wouldn't apologize if Lu Han is doomed. Chapter 1403 First Battle. Chapter 1403 First Battle. In boundless Milky Way, Hall Master Yuan and his fellow Deacon Elderlies were chatting casually. Lu Han is so stupid. Who does he think he is? He thought that he was Ling Feibai? He's just an ordinary disciple. How dare he be in doubt of the result that Hall Master Yuan and us Deacon Elderlies agreed upon? He thought Jian Wushuang didn't stay in Supreme Tower as long as he did and assumed that Jian Wushuang couldn't be stronger than him. What a joke. Whoever stayed longer in Supreme Tower is stronger? Ridiculous. The Deacon Elderlies saw clearly how long Jian Wushuang had stayed in Supreme Tower earlier. They were sure that Jian Wushuang was definitely stronger than Lu Han, and by a considerable amount. The reason Jian Wushuang only stayed in Supreme Tower for 17 breaths was that the opponent that he was fighting against was a war puppet. An expert who is good at consciousness attack fights against war puppets won't have any conscious. Jian Wushuang was at great disadvantage but even so, he stayed for 17 breaths. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, Jian Wushuang only used the consciousness manipulation method in Supreme Tower and didn't perform any consciousness secret skills or anything. He didn't even use any swords principles. His power should not have to be put to play entirely. If he were to give his all, even if he was at a great disadvantage as he fought against a war puppet, he should be able to persist for a longer time. A Deacon Elderly in a gold robe casually commented. Look. Jian Wushuang is going to take action. Hall Master Yuan and the other Deacon Elderlies looked towards Titanic Star. On Titanic Star, the rotation battle had begun. Similarly to the rotation battle among Universe God in the first heaven, the 10 disciples took turns to fight against one another. Everyone had to fight 9 battles. The very first battle was between Jian Wushuang and Luo Quan. When the Deacon Elderly on Titanic Star announced the 2 of them for the first battle, it stirred a commotion on Titanic Star in that instant. One opponent was Jian Wushuang, who had been a controversial person for the past 800 years. Especially as everyone was still in doubt of his power, he immediately had to take action. The other one was publicly known as the strongest ordinary disciple among universe gods in the second heaven. Plus, it so happened that the first person that Jian Wushuang had lost to after he had got to lineage of star was Luo Quan. The 2 of them were enemies to begin with. Before everyone's gaze, Jian Wushuang walked to the middle of Titanic Star slowly. Just as Luo Quan was going to walk forward, Chu Yang, who was behind him, reminded him softly, "Luo Quan, be careful. Don't belittle him, especially be careful of his consciousness attack." Consciousness attack? Luo Quan was stunned but suddenly sneered, "I fought with him 800 years ago. He used consciousness attacks then too. It didn't affect me at all. Even if he did improve tremendously over the past 800 years, he was so far behind me it won't matter even now." Luo Quan sneered as he walked to the middle of Titanic Star. He stood opposite Jian Wushuang a large distance away. The moment Luo Quan appeared on the battlefield, his face grew cold and he put his guard up. It was clear that Hall Master Yuan and the Deacon Elderlies were in agreement that Jian Wushuang was stronger than Lu Han, so it must be true. This point alone showed that Jian Wushuang was not that weak. Although Lu Han wasn't very strong, I'd need to put in time and effort to defeat him. Jian Wushuang is definitely stronger than Lu Han. I can't be careless. I must give my all from the very beginning. Otherwise, I might miss the quota to become a disciple of Star Palace. Luo Quan licked his lips as he fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang. At the same time, Jian Wushuang was looking at Luo Quan while he sent a message. "Qiuyu, are all of you here yet?" "Yes, mister. All the maid and servants on Sword Star are watching at the border of Titanic Star," Qiuyu replied. "All right. Watch the next scene. Don't miss it." Jian Wushuang sounded calm. After he sent the message, he spoke, "Luo Quan, you once said that my property as a disciple of Star Palace, my Sword Star, including the maids and servants under my command, would become yours after this battle. Now I am standing before you. Defeat me and you will naturally get everything that you wanted." "Humph, you think I can't?" Luo Quan sneered, 800 years ago, you were once defeated by me. This time you'll be decimated." The moment Luo Quan said that, he suddenly charged forward like a raging beast. He was wearing a pair of crimson gloves on his hand and they were giving out a bold scarlet light. Suddenly, Luo Quan appeared before Jian Wushuang. There was an ancient roar reverberating as his right hand curled into a fist and transformed into a ferocious beast. It was plunging at Jian Wushuang with a terrifying force. Looking at the attack that Luo Quan had pulled, the surrounding disciples looked shocked. Jian Wushuang still isn't taking action. What is he doing standing there? Hurry up and block the attack. The disciples started panicking on behalf of Jian Wushuang, but he didn't even move an inch. It was almost as though he was scared stiff. However, just as the beast transformed from the crimson fist descending on Jian Wushuang, he suddenly lifted his head and there was an intense crimson light that erupted. The crimson light was just like a scarlet sun. It was blinding yet eye-catching. Everyone couldn't help but be attracted by the scarlet sun, and Luo Quan was the first to bear the brunt of it. It was a consciousness attack secret skill by Real God Demonic Rain on Real God ranking list, 18 Asura Hell, which was performed by Jian Wushuang, who possessed soul power that was at the level of peak universe god in the third heaven. Ah! A shrill scream was heard across Titanic Star. The ferocious beast that had transformed from the fist dispersed straight away, but left Luo Quan alone, bellowing like a madman. His face was distorted and red with agony. The veins on his forehead and arms popped. He looked ferocious. His eyes were bloodshot too. He waved his hands desperately as an enormous amount of divine power splashed out, but it didn't reach Jian Wushuang at all. He continued to bellow. "No. No. Stop, quick stop. Ah. Hurry up and stop." The entire Titanic Star and the entire boundless Milky Way were shaken by the shrill, mad bellow. The surrounding disciples on Titanic Star were shocked at the sight. What happened to him? Chapter 1404. Amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Chapter 1404. Amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. At the border of Titanic Star, all the disciples were dumbfounded. They were all shocked. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Luo Quan as Luo Quan's pathetic roar reverberated in their ears. Phantasmagoria, it's phantasmagoria, one of the disciples shouted. Suddenly everyone understood. Looking at the sight before their eyes, Luo Quan was obviously in Jian Wushuang's phantasmagoria. He couldn't shake it off, he couldn't free himself from it. He could only suffer under the effect of the phantasmagoria. Such a scary phantasmagoria, even Luo Quan couldn't shake it off. What did he go into the phantasmagoria? How could he be in so much pain? The surrounding disciples were terrified. What they didn't know was that the reason the 18 Asura hell that real god demonic rain created was to torture. It was a method to torture one's consciousness. 18 Asura hell had 18 floors of dreamland in total. Every floor was a phantasmagoria of suffering. Jian Wushuang was performing the first 6 floors. Luo Quan drowned in the 6 floors of phantasmagoria and he was naturally suffering. No. His pathetic groans continued, but suddenly, it was as though Luo Quan's tongue was removed. His words were blocked and they could barely hear noises from his nose. He seemed to be saying, "Let me live, please. Show mercy. Let me go, please. Let me go." That sight struck up terror. The disciples were imagining just how scary the phantasmagoria was that was making Luo Quan beg for mercy. In the Milky Way, Hall Master Yuan and the other 10 deacon elderly stood side by side as they watched the sight before them. Even the deacon elderlies were shocked. Previously, in the Supreme Tower, his consciousness attack couldn't be performed as he was fighting against a war puppet. Now that he is facing a human cultivator, he could put many tricks to play. Just the phantasmagoria that he showed currently is impressive enough. True. Luo Quan is a genius disciple in the lineage of Star. He has high hopes of entering Star Palace. Although he isn't as good at consciousness, he is at least at the level of an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven. But he begged for mercy in the phantasmagoria that Jian Wushuang put him in. To be able to do so, not only would it require Jian Wushuang to have a stronger consciousness than he does, but it also requires a terrifying dreamland technique. I'm curious about what Luo Quan went through in the dreamland. The deacon elderlies conversed casually. As dreamland was only aimed at one single person, only that particular person could experience the phantasmagoria in the dreamland. The others could only see Luo Quan in agony. He looked like he was suffering, but no one knew what he was going through in the dreamland. On Titanic Star, the disciples saw Luo Quan in pain and everyone gulped. Chu Yang, who was in the crowd, was terrified too. I already reminded Luo Quan to be careful of Jian Wushuang's consciousness attack, but in the end he still failed. Chu Yang shook his head and sighed. Back when he had met Jian Wushuang in the Milky Way, he had fought with Jian Wushuang and he taught him a lesson. Hence, in the entire lineage of Star, only he knew that Jian Wushuang's power wasn't as weak as it looked, especially his consciousness attack. Hence, he had especially reminded Luo Quan earlier. However, even with his reminder, Luo Quan still fell into Jian Wushuang's dreamland and was unable to free himself from it. On the other side, Lu Han's face grew grave. He finally knew why Hall Master Yuan and the other deacon elderlies had agreed that Jian Wushuang was stronger than him. Even Luo Quan couldn't withstand it and got struck by the phantasmagoria. If it was him, he would not be able to fight back either. Am I leaving lineage of Star? Lu Han felt bitter. In the middle of the battlefield, the veins on Luo Quan's forehead and arms all popped up. He looked extremely ferocious. He was still in the dreamland and he was suffering on the 3rd floor of dreamland, Ironwood Hell. Jian Wushuang was standing there with a cold expression. Qiuyu, did you see that? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, we saw, mister. We saw. There was an obvious excitement in Qiuyu's voice. That will do, Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. He was too lazy to take another look at Luo Quan, but he looked at the deacon elderly who was the host for the rotation battle. Can you announce the result? The deacon elderly was stunned but immediately responded. I announce that, in this battle, Jian Wushuang is the winner. The deacon elderly announced the result straight away. Of course, even if he didn't, everyone at the scene could tell. Luo Quan's consciousness was drowning in the dreamland. He couldn't shake it off. If Jian Wushuang were to take action then, he could have killed Luo Quan easily. Jian Wushuang turned around and walked to the back after the announcement. Jian Wushuang, Luo Quan's phantasmagoria, the deacon elderly couldn't help but say. Soon he will come back to reality, Jian Wushuang said and left without turning back. As expected, Luo Quan, who went through the 6 floors of dreamland, slowly recovered. However, even though his consciousness had recovered, he was still terrified. Jian Wushuang. Luo Quan stared at Jian Wushuang, but there wasn't any sort of denial. There was only terror. No one knew how much indescribable torture he had gone through in the dreamland in a short period of time. The suffering was so real that he would never forget it for the rest of his life. It was the scariest dreamland he had encountered since he had started cultivation. He definitely didn't want to experience such a dreamland a second time. Hence, he naturally didn't dare to provoke Jian Wushuang again. He could only move back with some help from 2 other disciples. In the first battle, in the rotation battle, Jian Wushuang had won. The result naturally shocked the surrounding disciples. Jian Wushuang defeated Luo Quan? He didn't even move an inch. He only performed a dreamland technique and defeated Luo Quan. He was totally thrashed. How could it be? Isn't Jian Wushuang always weak? 800 years ago, when he first came to the lineage of Star, any ordinary disciple could easily have trampled him. Jian Wushuang improved tremendously in the past 800 years. His power increased so significantly, but he never shows off. Even when all of us doubted his power and thought he wasn't qualified to become a disciple of Star Palace, he never explained himself. During this battle, he proved himself to us with his power. His patience and endurance is next level. Amazing the world with a single brilliant feat. Jian Wushuang impressive. Chapter 1405 Rotation Battle. Chapter 1405 Rotation Battle. If the disciples had been in doubt of Jian Wushuang's power and thought he wasn't qualified to be a disciple of Star Palace, the doubts had definitely vanished after the battle between him and Luo Quan. Since the very beginning, Jian Wushuang had never once made an explanation. But he proved himself with absolute power during the battle. From that day on, in Lineage of Star, there wouldn't be anyone who was in doubt of his ability as a disciple of Star Palace. Then the rotation battles continued. Jian Wushuang returned outside Titanic Star and watched quietly as he recovered his soul power. Very soon, his second rotation battle began. The next battle will be Jian Wushuang versus Xiaoyu, the deacon elderly's voice reverberated on Titanic Star. Jian Wushuang and Xiaoyu, who were both called upon, walked forward. The 2 of them stood opposite one another in the distance. Xiaoyu was just an ordinary disciple and she was weaker in power compared to Luo Quan. If there wasn't any accident during the battle, there wouldn't be any suspense. Jian Wushuang, perform the trick that you used on Luo Quan. Xiaoyu looked solemn as she stared at Jian Wushuang. Although she was extremely astonished by the sight of Jian Wushuang defeating Luo Quan, the phantasm that Jian Wushuang performed instilled fear in Xiaoyu. However, she was afraid of Jian Wushuang's phantasm only. As for the other attacks, she believed that Jian Wushuang wouldn't be her match. As long as I can endure his phantasmagoria images and shake off his dreamland, I will win the battle. Xiaoyu clenched her fists. When Jian Wushuang heard her, he shook his head and said, I don't need to pull that trick when I'm against you. Are you humiliating me? Xiaoyu got furious. Let's see what you have. Swoosh. Xiaoyu took action directly. She had a purple long spear in her hand. The moment the purple long spear appeared, there was an explosion of huge power immediately. Swoosh. The long spear turned into a bunch of crimson-purple rays. It pierced the void and appeared before Jian Wushuang. It had yet to reach Jian Wushuang and he could feel the terrifying spiraling force that the tip of the long spear had brought about. Jian Wushuang didn't look like he had moved much, but just as the purple long spear was about to stab his body, vroom, a vast expanse of soul power suddenly soared and immediately formed into a huge black tortoise on the surface of Jian Wushuang's body. The purple long spear stabbed the black tortoise shell and there was a loud clash, but it didn't move an inch. What? Xiaoyu was shocked. Just then Jian Wushuang saw a ray of sharp light. Roar, roar, roar. 3 roars were heard simultaneously. Suddenly, 3 huge demonic dragons transformed from the billowing soul power on Titanic Star. The 3 demonic dragons were pitch black and they gave out fierce aura. It was as though they came from a borderless hell and they flew out like lightning. The three demonic dragons charged towards Xiaoyu in unison. The strong, imposing aura that the demonic dragons brought along frightened Xiaoyu. She could feel that with one of the dragons would be extremely difficult to fight off, let alone the fact that there were three in total then. Go away. Xiaoyu screamed and wielded the purple long spear in her hand. The eruption of her divine power suddenly became three strikes of lightning. They suddenly flew at the skulls of three demonic dragons. However, the three demonic dragons were moving flexibly in the void and they dodged Xiaoyu's long spear easily. They are so flexible. Xiaoyu was terrified. The very next moment, the three demonic dragons appeared next to her and started tearing at her. Xiaoyu didn't endure long before she was defeated. In the boundless Milky Way, the deacon elderlies laughed at the sight. Just as we expected, Jian Wushuang didn't give his all in the Supreme Tower. Yeah. For instance, he only put one demonic dragon into play when he was in Supreme Tower. The demonic dragon could barely be evenly matched with an ordinary advanced universe god in the third heaven. He put three dragons to play at one goal and it is only natural that Xiaoyu couldn't fight against them. Xiaoyu intended to make Jian Wushuang perform the phantasmagoria trick that he used against Luo Quan. But, in the end, Jian Wushuang defeated her with just his consciousness manipulation method alone. Jian Wushuang defeated Xiaoyu and it was within everyone's expectations. Everyone accepted the result easily. But their fight still shocked many disciples. However, when he fought against Xiaoyu, he didn't even use any secret skills. He won merely with the manipulation of consciousness. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang knew more than just pulling one into dreamland. The rotation battles were rather ferocious. Everyone had to go through 9 battles. At the beginning, Jian Wushuang only fought against ordinary disciples like Luo Quan and Xiaoyu. They were hardly any troubler for Jian Wushuang. However, his third opponent was a disciple of Star Palace. The next battle will be Jian Wushuang versus Xia Feng. On Titanic Star, Jian Wushuang and Xia Feng stood opposite one another. Xiao Feng was in a crimson robe. Although he looked young, he had silver-white hair. Then Xia Feng looked at Jian Wushuang. I heard that you gave my people a lesson on Taiyuan Star. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded, making no attempt at denial. Those were just servants. I had nothing to do with them. They behaved wrongly, and you, as a disciple of Star Palace, took action to give them a lesson. It is only right and proper. I don't mind. However, I will not let you win against me in today's fight, Xia Feng said. Then we shall see if you have the power to, Jian Wushuang replied coldly. I'll let you know, Xia Feng smiled. Jian Wushuang, I know your consciousness attack is very powerful, especially your dreamland. However, I am different from Luo Quan and Xiaoyu. They are only ordinary disciples. They never once had a chance to enter Reset Palace to train their consciousness. But I trained for a very long time in Reset Palace. My consciousness strength already reached the level of an advanced universe god in the third heaven. I am only one step away from a peak universe god in the third heaven. Can your dreamland do anything to me? There's only one way to find out. Jian Wushuang didn't say much but flipped his palm and Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hand. Xia Feng too took out his divine weapon. It was a pair of gold shackles that looked extremely heavy and the aura it gave out was rather fierce too. It begins. Xia Feng smiled and in the next moment his body shook and he plunged towards Jian Wushuang at a ghostly speed. Jian Wushuang's eyes were like blazing fires. The moment he saw Xia Feng move, vast soul power swept out and suddenly transformed into 3 huge demonic dragons again. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.